He walked out in the gray light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world. The cold, relentless circling of the intestate earth. Darkness implacable. The blind dogs of the sun in their running. The crushing black vacuum of the universe. And somewhere 200 animals trembling like ground foxes in their cover. Borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it.
And lo, for the earth was empty of form, and void, and darkness was all over the face of the deep, and we said, look at that fucker dance.
Welcome to Heat Death of the Universe. We are pre-recording at you from Seoul, South Korea, with a hard timestamp for posterity at 10:53 a.m. Korea Standard Time is Wednesday, May 10th, 2021. But also, through the miracle of living on a spherical Earth, we have a special guest also beaming in from their respective Tuesday evening, May 9th. These are exciting facts, folks. Time zones are still very novel to me, even after all these years.
Who's our guest?
I have the brain of a golden retriever. It's true. Yes, joining us today is, I should have asked you this before, Weston Pagano?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, cool.
It's Italian, so just use your hands if you get stuck.
I wasn't sure if I should go G or J sound exactly. Yes, the creator of the very valuable Twitter account Waiting on Biden. Among his many bona fides.
Everything's going to be pronounced Italian now.
Yes. He is, quote, not a political figure, according to the brain geniuses at PolitiFact. Also works with the nonprofit organization. This is another thing I'm going to pronounce it Races?
Yes, and I guess I should clarify that we're not affiliated with them. We're simply running a fundraiser that benefits them.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've raised almost 10K already in our first month, which I'm really excited about. And Races, they do fantastic work with immigrant services. So they provide legal help. They help reunite families, get kids out of cages, that sort of thing. And yeah, we've worked with a few artists like Eli Valley, Laura Rojas, the Meme Industrial Complex, Bachelor Clues.
Cool.
Enough. And they all contributed some pieces, which I then slapped on a bunch of merch, as one does in the drop shipping world. And our lovely followers then purchased that, and 100% of the proceeds benefit Races. So it's kind of just, putting your money where your mouth is. I spend all day tweeting and complaining about things. What can we do to, if not directly fix some of those things, at least help the people who are on the ground doing so? And so that was kind of the motivation of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'll admit I hadn't actually heard of the organization before, but I've looked into them now, and yeah, it seems like a very worthy cause.
I can't remember who it was who emailed them. It may have been, I think it was one of the PR people from ICE actually, emailed them and said something to the effect of, "You're never willing to help ICE." And they now wear that as a badge of honor. So when I was deciding who to benefit, I saw that and I was like, oh, ICE is complaining that these guys will never help them. That sounds like a good one to work with. So.
That sounds like a also sort of excellent just slogan t-shirt.
Great endorsement.
Yeah. Put it on a phone case, put it on a bumper sticker. Also, like, people can buy that stuff at waitingonbiden.com, right?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So that's in our bio. That's our pinned tweet. I own the premium account to Wix and Printify for 1 year. So most people are like, help us reach this goal in 30. I was like, it's going to be up for a year. So obviously, we're looking at getting new pieces, and we're going to try to, freshen things up. But yeah, at least for the time being, as long as people keep donating, I'm going to keep it running. So yeah, that's that.
Cool. And I'll add also the that you've written a few really good Medium articles with titles like "A Guide to the 2020 Democratic Candidates You Should Not Vote For." I would say, aka all of them except Bernie. Spoiler alert, maybe. A progressive's got. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, people would very angrily comment sometimes, like, "Oh, I bet you like Bernie, don't you?" And I'm like, "Well, yes. Like, if you support a good candidate, you would want to juxtapose that with some of the bad candidates. Like, it's not a gotcha."
Yeah, that's not a gotcha at all. Like, so then the people who are criticizing everyone except Elizabeth Warren, that would be a gotcha. You must be one of those Warren supporters.
Yeah, well, and I very intentionally did not include her on that list because I wanted to really kind of juxtapose the worst of the worst,
right?
And really show, look, maybe a Warren person is not going to vote for Bernie, but maybe that Warren person at least could be convinced not to vote for Buttigieg, right? And so I was trying to do that, and then I followed it up with another piece that compared Bernie and Warren on every single issue, which came out later once it was clear that Warren had no path to victory and was simply siphoning off votes from the more progressive contingent of the primary pool. And the polling showed that Bernie was the second choice of the people who voted for her. And so that, again, was a very honest and open and objective look at, like, here's how they're different. It didn't say vote for one or the other. It's just, here's the comparison of every issue. And I really thought that spoke for itself. And, to see people on Twitter sharing these pieces and say, I was going to vote for XYZ, and then I decided not to because I learned this information, that was really eye-opening, and it's just, that was the whole purpose of doing it. It wasn't necessarily to tell people what they had to do or what I wanted them to do. It was to say, look, I aggregated all this information, make your own conclusions. And ultimately, we all think we're well informed, but there's just so much we don't know. And a lot of people working don't have time to go on and research what did Joe Biden do in 1982. But I was unemployed for a few months. I got laid off that year, so I had time to research what Biden was doing in 1982. So
sure,
that's kind of what was the catalyst for some of that.
Yeah, I mean,
it could be really hard to even keep up with this stuff if you do have time, because researching it can be tough. Like, actually being motivated to go out for it, like, maybe you do watch cable TV and you're watching NBC or ABC or whatever, and what they tell you is like such a small portion of the story occasionally, but you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, we've got my team, the Democrats, we've got that team, the Republicans, they're all basically the same, whoever the candidate is. So I
mean, to give you a little bit of background, I mean, I grew up in a very, very, very small town in the rural deep South.
Oh, cool. Where are you from? Sorry.
I grew up in South Carolina. So
okay, I grew up in Tennessee. So
okay, so you get it. I mean, it's as red as it can be. I went to the same high school Lindsey Graham went to. It's a very, very Republican area. And so growing up, I was like, oh, I'm a liberal, I'm a Democrat, I'm enlightened, I'm different, I'm smart, I'm not racist. Like, I'm, Obama's the greatest thing ever. And, I am so much better than everyone else who doesn't understand that. And, it's something I had to grow out of, when I moved to a city, I met different kinds of people, and I saw, like, I lived in Chicago, I lived in the bluest of the blues. And I was like, wait a minute, there's still racism, there's still inequality, there's still all these same problems. And, I had that kind of awakening where I was like, look, like, there's more to it than this. Right. And I had to educate myself, and I had to really kind of wake up. And so, again, the motivation is just like, look, I would never have been exposed to the things that changed my view of the world if I hadn't stepped out of my bubble. And now I'm in a liberal bubble. And the same thing is true again. If you don't step out of that bubble, you won't see these other things. And one of my favorite tweets of all time is something like, I joined Twitter to follow the Jonas Brothers, and now I'm a socialist. And I still think of that because, I joined Twitter to follow a soccer team, and then I was exposed to these political ideologies and other viewpoints, some of which I don't agree with and some of which I do. And I was able to make those decisions because I was exposed to them, and I would never have been otherwise. So maybe someone will find this account or this medium or this podcast, and maybe they'll have a moment where they challenge something that they believe as well. Who knows?
Yeah, I was also in that, I guess I grew up in a very red area of Tennessee, small town. And felt the same way about Obama. I thought the world was going to change, but I think a lot of people did. There was a lot of hope tied up around him. It was this whole branding. It's hard to escape it.
You guys,
I don't know if
sorry for a second. I have a technical emergency here. Suddenly being told that it's going to end the Zoom chat in like 9 minutes. I don't understand why. So yeah, I mean, I guess like I already kind of explained, I guess the only agenda really is to just go through these 100 days and like the kind of compilation you came up with. And yeah, I figure there's plenty to talk about there. So
I want to promote the best American president we've ever had.
This is, I mean, if Biden is FDR, then this is like a fireside chat. Right.
Right. I mean, sorry,
yeah, I didn't watch any sort of mainstream coverage until a few minutes ago, which I think I just sent you on Twitter, but
yeah,
it was just this fawning like 5-minute piece on like PBS, and I was like, what universe is this? Especially having just spent a bunch of time going through all of this itemized list that you made. I was like, oh hey, I recognize that bit, but they're leaving out like all of the horror shows behind it. Like,
yeah, I mean, as someone under the age of 50, I don't usually watch the news on a television.
Right.
But
yeah, same. It's real rare for me to.
I figure if it's something that's so good or so bad that I need to see it, it will trickle down through Twitter eventually, for better or worse. But I actually, incidentally, since you mentioned that, I had been spending some time with a grandparent who does watch the nightly evening news. And so I just by happenstance ended up seeing a lot of the coverage around the 100 days that I normally would not have been exposed to that degree. So it was really interesting working on this thread, and then coming inside. I was sitting on the porch working on this thread, kind of detached from everything. And then I'd come inside and see what she was watching on TV, and it would just be like completely incongruent with what I was seeing and what I was doing. And that stark contrast is, I think, good to reacquaint ourselves with. You know what I mean? Because the whole purpose of me doing this account was to try to reach people in the liberal bubbles that I often inhabit rather. And we know what the people around us are or aren't exposed to in a general sense, but to actually sit down and see it firsthand, I think is whatever the opposite of refreshing is. Astonishing. I don't know. You get the
alienating. I don't know. It makes me feel like I'm like I don't know. I've like stepped through the fucking Stargate or some whatever, the other side of the looking glass, whatever, what have you. It's just it's surreal to me, like to see any sort of mainstream news coverage, like the rare times that I do, because yeah, like you said, under 50, don't really watch television. Also, don't live in America, so not really an opportunity for that anyway. But
yeah, I mean, I don't interact with a whole lot of Biden bros, as we can call them, semi-ironically. But I think the thing that I often hear from these folks is, how come you're not saying this good thing that Biden did? How come you're not saying this problem he solved? How come you're being one-sided? And I think it's very clear the point of the account is to highlight the negatives, specifically because they are not being highlighted elsewhere. I mean, if you want to hear the positives, if you want the sort of stenography, if you if you want that sort of praise, there's already a media apparatus for that. There's already plenty of other avenues with which you can, receive and revel in that sort of information. So, it's. I think I'm very transparent in what I set out to do with the account and what the point of the account is, to kind of balance out a lot of those other things that are flying around online and on TV and other media. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can always fire back to that criticism, like, well, where's any sort of negative portrayal? And like, it's also, I'm a Twitter account. Like, are you really like comparing me with like NBC, CBS, whatever? Like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of doing their job for them, really, in a way, or at least like, if there's supposed to be some sort of balance there, yeah, like you're taking care of that other side of it. If not,
Right.
I mean, in someone like my opinion would be more like you're giving a more accurate depiction overall, not just only pointing out the negatives. But yeah, I noticed that in that the PolitiFact gotcha, where they really got your ass. Like I read it and I was just kind of like, I even said, I texted something to Jason about it yesterday. I was like, this whole thing amounts to them saying, yeah, sure, everything you said is true, but you forgot to mention that all Democrats were doing this back in the 90s, or like something to that effect. Like, as if that's a real gotcha. Like, yeah, he did this terrible thing, but everybody was doing it. Come on.
Right. I mean, we can go all day about the media and all that sort of stuff. And I always laugh when people say Bernie's just like Trump. He also hates the press, which is very funny because FDR hated the press more than any president. And now he's being favorably compared to Biden. So it's all very selective. But I guess, at the end of the day, look, I don't work in politics. I'm just a regular guy. I've volunteered on campaigns. I've donated to campaigns. I've written Medium articles, but I don't work in politics. I'm not a politician. I'm not really a part of that world in any professional context. And, so when PolitiFact reached out to me, I kind of naively was like, oh, this will be great. You know what I mean? I was like,
of course.
Yeah. I'm like, cool. Like, this is a fact. You guys do facts. This will be nice. And I look back and I think how naive I was, because I don't know why I was surprised. But they interviewed me and I sent them. First of all, I guess to give context for people who don't know, my foray into social media politic world was I wrote Medium articles where I basically, I mean, look, again, I'm not a journalist either. I'm just simply aggregating, sources and stuff. So this article I put out, I just aggregated a list of every single reason why you shouldn't vote for Biden and Kamala and a few others.
Right.
And I remember reading through that when you posted it before I think the podcast, maybe right around the same time we started our podcast.
It came from a very genuine place. It was, I supported Bernie in 2016 and I supported Bernie in 2020. And I managed to convince some of my family to support Bernie as well. And then when 2020 rolled around, you got 15,000 other so-called progressives who all jumped into the race. My mom or my grandma were like, oh, this Buttigieg guy seems nice, or this Kamala woman seems inspiring. And I'm thinking, yes, you're right, they do. And I realized I needed to push back on that perception, because if I watched Kamala interrogate a Trump appointee, I would think she's fucking amazing. If I listened to, Buttigieg do the Obama intonation, I'd think, cool. Hope.
Yeah.
Didn't you see all those cell phones in the high school gymnasium? Come on.
Yeah, right. So I was looking at this and I'm like, I need to send my family some sources. I did some research. I was like, maybe they are good, and they weren't. And so I was like, I need to send some sources to my family so they don't fall for this. And my family was like, literally my mother. I mean, again, it's very, very kind of organic place that this came from. My mom was like, just make a list and send me a list. I'm like, cool. So I'm like sitting in my lunch break, aggregating articles, again, from the media, from NPR and from New York Times and from CNBC and from the same places that, these same sources. And the list just kept getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. And I might as well just do all of it, right? So I might as well just do their entire history as people. And then I thought, this is too much. I got to post it online somewhere. Maybe someone else will find it useful and they can show it to their boyfriend or their mother or their mom. Coworker.
Yeah.
And it just blew up. I mean, I've got over 1 million views on this Medium account that I just threw together on lunch breaks.
And that was the guide to the 2020 candidates article?
So there's that one. There's a Biden-specific one, which obviously I pull from this account. There's one comparing Bernie and Warren on every single detail. And there was one on why Bernie was electable. And so I got all these views. And so PolitiFact reached out to me. And to kind of come full circle, it was very funny because when they ran the piece, they said, Weston, who's not a political figure. We normally wouldn't talk to a person who isn't a political figure. But they're like, this random guy's got so many hits on this dumb article. We better talk to him. So they picked out one piece of one bullet point in this article that had hundreds of bullet points.
Right.
And the bullet point was Biden voted multiple times for indefinite detention for migrants, which is true. And in the interview, I sent them multiple sources for the multiple times he voted for indefinite detentions. And they ended up giving me a half true rating because they said, first of all, they only included one of the times. They just left out the other times.
Right.
And then they tried to discredit that time on the caveat that lots of other people voted for it too. And they mentioned that lots of other people voted for it too. So Biden was, to normalize Biden's vote, I think 4 or 5 times in the piece. So then I reached back out to them and I'm like, look, why did you exclude all of the other times? So you could say, gotcha, it wasn't multiple times. There's only one. We're only going to mention one. And why did you leave out how Bernie voted against it? Because if you're going to talk about how other people voted for it, you should talk about how his current rival in a current election had a differing view. Because, whatever random senator voted against that one time in the 80s, I mean, that just is irrelevant, And they're like, no, we just didn't have room. So they
we exceeded our word count. Sorry.
And I'm like, well, if you deleted some of the apology, I don't even know how, if you're an apologist, what is it that you're doing? I don't even know the word. If you delete all the rationalization of what he did, you could probably fit in the other stuff that you need to put in there. so it just was so funny. I was like, I can't believe it. They're not even telling me that I'm wrong. They're just telling me they just don't care, And so I always laugh when someone replies to me. They're like, oh, this guy's only half true.
I feel like there's been a few, I'm just going to say this without checking myself, but I feel like there's been a few instances in recent memory of PolitiFacts being very biased for Biden, for better or worse.
Yeah, it happens way more than I anticipated at the time, where now it'll be like, oh yeah, he said that, but it's not really what he meant. Or, oh yeah, he did do that, but actually it's okay.
Yeah.
It's very brazen.
That's the part that gets me the most is it's and it's usually it's through 2 or 3 or 4 unnecessarily wordy paragraphs that basically amount to, yes, this is true. And then 6 or 7 more paragraphs that amount to, but look at everybody else was doing it. And I mean, it's just, it's at the level of a child's thinking, really.
But if everyone else is doing it, it's okay.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying. It's that's the stuff, that's the way that, kids think, and your parents have to correct you and be like, well, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would,
Well, and you see that thinking in general, when Biden will do something bad, they'll say, oh, well, Trump did something bad too. And it's like, yes, that's what we're saying. He's doing bad things just like Trump, and they'll say, oh, well, he did it 5% less badly. I think someone actually cited specifically 5% on some budget thing. And I'm like, okay, 5% better than the worst president in the world is not really the defense that you think it is,
Right.
Yeah, that's not
well, it comes from the other side as well. I mean, I know this is one of the sort of bullet points, but so Trump Trump dropped the top marginal income tax rate to 21%, I think, from 35, and Biden's proposal is to raise it to 28, which is like, I mean, even 35 was like historically low, yeah. But it's like
lower than the majority of modern history.
Yeah, but yet he's going to be praised like up and down for raising it, 7% higher without any contextualization of what that actually means,
Well, and we'll get into this when we start breaking down the thread, but I think in general, this is a lot of why nothing ever gets better, because you've got Republicans who will do something bad, and then Democrats will come in and then they'll preserve most of it and symbolically reduce some of it, or they'll just ignore it, or they'll perpetuate it, or whatever it may be. But a lot of a Democratic politician's career is simply virtue signaling while not doing anything, right? And so you're either making small incremental changes that don't even nearly undo the damage that's been done in a way that makes you complicit in the damage. Or you just like, I didn't put this one on the list, but it's like Cuba, keeping Cuba on this terrorist watch list. It's like, okay, well, Biden is objectively no different from Trump on this issue.
Right.
And he doesn't take the PR hit of having to pull the trigger, but he just leaves it there. You know what I mean? Like, you see someone stab someone on the street and you just walk away, like, well, you didn't do it, but you're certainly not making anything better. And then if I say, well, hey, you'd let that guy die, well, they're like, oh, well, the other guy before stabbed him. It's like, okay, again, not a good benchmark, right? It's just like we can have slightly higher standards if we dare to do so. And I think that's partially what we're trying to do with this account.
Well, and then, I mean, of course, the excuses are like pretty plentiful, but it's like, yeah, Joe Biden walked by the dying man, but it's because Joe Manchin stepped in his way and shoved him into the street, or so, whatever it is. Like, there's always going to be some excuse for like either extending, preserving, however you want to put it, like these terrible policies. And then, I mean, the other thing to think about too is that a lot of these policies were already set into motion when Biden was the VP for 8 years to begin with. But maybe we should hop into the specifics here.
But yeah, I mean, before we jump in, into the list, just to kind of finish that last bit, was I think one of the funniest things about running this account is that the only criticisms that I consistently get from supporters of Biden is that they think I'm British.
Really?
I'm not a citizen. They think I'm an immigrant, which is always really funny because it kind of, it outs them as being very xenophobic. It's like, oh, why would an immigrant not be allowed to have an opinion on the government, for one thing? But I'm not British. I thought about doing this podcast in a British accent. I decided against it. But so people like falsely accuse me of the birther movement. It's like you're not from here. Where's the birth certificate? And then the other thing was, recently I had someone say, oh, of course this guy's from Brooklyn. And it's like, yeah, okay, I normally live in Brooklyn, and but like I said, I grew up in a really small town in the deep South. And so for a sort of self-described centrist liberal Biden supporter to try to discredit someone either because they're from somewhere else or because they're from a city it's very, very interesting to me, because they discredit Trump supporters as, oh, you're a redneck, oh, you're scum, oh, you live in a small town.
Right.
And it's like, why are the only criticisms of people critiquing the president where they're from, where their origin? It's always, their background's not acceptable. It's not a satisfactory resume that they've got or something.
I take that as like having just run out of, like, that's just scraping the bottom of the barrel. That's like grasping at straws, that's the way I take that. I mean, it's just such an absurd way to push back on something that's irritating you politically.
I know there was that one time that we got or maybe more than one time now, but we've been messaged on Twitter before to for South Korea to shut up. And it's
Oh yeah.
come on, we're recording from South Korea, but we're still Americans.
I think it's good that we don't have any pictures of ourselves. It's just this generic logo. So yeah, this one like for total. I mean, if this word it fits anyone, it fit this particular person, Wine Mom, who was like, I don't know, whatever. It was just it was like a dumb, frivolous Twitter interaction, but it was the first. I think that's probably the only time we've gotten someone saying like "go back to Korea" or something like that.
Yeah.
Like we don't have any right to say anything because even though it says clearly like we're U.S. expats, but even if we weren't, that's beside the point. But yeah, I mean that to me just seems like when you've completely run out of ideas.
Also, when you're from a country that literally has its fingers in like every other country in the world, I think just about everyone has a right to criticize and also think about what the United States does because it's thinking about what everyone else is doing and affects what everyone else does.
It's the Zizek thing, right? From I think like 10 years ago or something. He said, I think I'm not going to try to do a Zizek impersonation, but he said, I think only people who don't live in the United States should be able to vote for the politicians of the United States.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm used to ad hominem attacks, but it just is so jaw dropping to say something like, oh, Biden's deporting more people than Trump. And the person replies something like, oh, you're not even from here. It's like, well, you know what I mean? It's like, well, no, I am. But that's the problem is that you people have no regard for human life if it's not from the right zip code, which, is inherently the problem of status quo politicians like Biden is that, we've all seen the reports, your zip code predicts your life.
Yeah.
And
well, it's just funny too, because those are generally kind of the same kind of people who would love to say that, Bernie and Trump have so much in common as whatever populists or, whatever, that horseshoe theory or like the red-brown alliance and all of that shit. And it's like a lot of the times I see, I mean, I don't know. There's like so many examples, but let's just look at this, even just the slogan, like restore the soul of America, make America great again. I mean, tell me what the fucking difference is.
Build Back Better is just a more awkward way of saying make America great again.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Trump stole that from Reagan, and Biden was to the right of Reagan on several things at the same time.
Right.
So it all, talking about horseshoe theory is no quicker way to say don't take me seriously than saying you believe in horseshoe theory. But I mean, if you did believe in horseshoe theory, the two prongs would be Democrats and Republicans. It wouldn't be left and right. It would be an entirely different. I mean, you certainly could make a case with that sort of graphic, but it wouldn't have the same data points. That's for sure.
Right. Well, I think we should jump into this list, which sure. I can't even actually remember now if I properly introduced this, but you made this great thread on Twitter that compiled like basically what's been going on in the Biden administration in the first 100 days. And does anyone happen to know what day we're in now? Not that it really matters, but we're not too far past the 100 days, right?
So we are actually got to scroll back because after we reached out, so before originally the account was just today's X day that this hasn't happened, today's X day this hasn't happened, and it was starting to get pretty repetitive. So I've broken out of that. So I actually didn't tweet a number today. So let me scroll back.
I remember when it was like, it's been this many days since fill in the blank.
Yeah, I'll still do those, but I'm just trying to break it up because I don't want people to just get bored with it. But 108th day was May 7th. Today's May 9th, so today would be the 110th day.
Okay. So we're not too far removed from that 100th day. I mean, I guess let's just start at the top then. While at the very top, we have the classic GIF of Biden falling upward.
No, I almost didn't put this on there because I constantly I grapple with who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
Right. I understand. Right. Well, according to a lot of the people in my DMs, they think I am Biden, actually, which is really funny. But, I'm preaching to the choir a lot, right? So a lot of the people who I'm speaking with, they already agree with me. And so a lot of it is like, well, here's sources you can use when you talk to other people is kind of the point of this account. But, with a thread like this, it's going to get retweeted a couple thousand times. You think, okay, well, this will reach people who don't know these things. Maybe this could change someone's mind, which is always a dangerous hope to have. And so I almost didn't use this image. I didn't want people to get turned off to it immediately. But you think, you spent 4 years rightfully making fun of Trump, walking down a ramp awkwardly or tripping on something, right?
Drinking water.
Yeah. And it always felt really stupid because it's like, okay, yeah, the dude doesn't know how to fucking drink water correctly. Like that's because, there's 17,000 other things we should be focusing on instead. So this was just like, look, like if you can make fun of Trump, you can make fun of Biden. And I think if you're more upset at laughing at the most powerful person in the world tripping than you are at the fact that that person's bombed, jailed, and deported millions of people, then your priorities are too fucked anyway. So
Right.
I actually think there's a weird thing right now with making fun of like Biden. Like, I feel like most presidents has been pretty fair game, but I think after like 4 years of intensely making fun of Trump and just pointing out like how far from the norm he is, that now there's almost this more defensive thing about like really don't take shots at Biden if you want to like I don't know be
satire's dead for one thing. And I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but actually I remember when Biden was announcing his run, it was a couple of years ago, maybe it's before he announced. But the folks at The Onion actually came out and they said, we regret humanizing Biden as this folksy uncle for so many years.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yeah, they're like, he's a monster who's ruined so many people's lives. We regret making him seem funny and harmless. And that was really eye-opening for me, where it's like, when a satirist comes out and was like, oh no.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they were just as much sort of like under the kind of like narcanizing like sway of the Obama years as like anyone else, or maybe not anyone else, but you know what I mean? Like, cause yeah, like we've talked about those Onion articles before as well, how like, I don't know, we and probably anyone we knew like at that time, like thought they were hilarious, like, and also we didn't really know who Biden really was back then, or at least I don't know. I can't speak for like everybody, obviously, but yeah, those articles are much harder to laugh at now, I guess, if you go back and read them.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. We all grew up with it. We grew up with this trajectory where we kind of evolved. I assume I don't speak for you two, but if, you come from a red state, you become a Democrat, then you become a leftist. You have that trajectory where we grew up with the same things that these organizations like The Onion and our political understanding evolved with them. Right. So we thought Joe Biden was the fun uncle when they were saying he was. And now we both realize that there's something more sinister there. And you look at Obama was running as the young progressive black man. And so he picked the old racist white guy to be his foil. I mean, he picked the conservatives specifically to balance out the ticket. And, that's why it's so funny to me when people say, oh, he's not racist because he's Obama's friend. Well, it's like, I have a black friend was never an excuse, much less in this situation where it's job, you know what I mean? So it just, especially when they picked they're friends with the guy specifically because they do appeal to some white racists, was just, I don't know, it was very, very, I would say funny is not the right word, but
yeah. And then the other thing, I mean, just, I mean, he's just put like calling everything that he says that's horrible a gaffe, that's a major problem. And like, I feel like that's still going on since the VP days. Like the one I'll never forget was when he referred to Obama as like, in so many words, one of the good ones. Like he literally called him clean He was like,
Yeah.
he's clean and well spoken, and like,
Yep.
he's like, come on, man, that's the whole package right there, man. And like, it's like, oh,
found a
silly
black man
Biden, he's
eloquent.
just putting his foot in his mouth again. It's like, no, he's like revealing some kind of deep, like racial, like at the very least, some problematic ideas, if not just outright racist stuff. But I mean, I guess speaking of Biden and race, I mean, first on the list here is the relationship or lack of one with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame this on a childhood stutter, no matter how hard you try.
No.
And this is who he's always been. And you know, with Black Lives Matter being the first entry on here, Black Lives Matter started under Obama and Biden for a reason, because the same problems were problems then, and they
Right.
weren't being fixed by the government then, and they're not being fixed by the government now. And it's not in this thread, but I think one of the most telling graphs that I think I've seen in the last few years was the Black Lives Matter approval rating. And it was very, very low during the Obama years. And it skyrocketed very, very high under Trump, because liberals saw BLM as an extremist movement when they had their guy in charge. But when the other guy was in charge, they saw it as a movement they could appropriate as a anti-government movement. And so I'll be very interested to see if, now that Black Lives Matter continues to criticize Biden, if that approval rating goes down. But as you can see in this first tweet, the protests led by Black Lives Matter is what dragged Biden across the finish line. Of course, other things, pandemic related, et cetera. But people always like to say it's a gotcha when they say, oh, you said Biden couldn't win. Well, everything that possibly could have changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think, I mean,
Uh,
I know a lot of people have probably said the same thing on other leftist podcasts, but I actually think the pandemic helped Biden win a lot. And
Absolutely.
it was like,
Absolutely.
I think without it, he 100% would have lost. I mean, I'm not going to put on like a real punditry hat here, but that's just that's my feeling in my bones.
Yeah, the two things that sink an incumbent are a massive scandal and an economic downturn. And we had both of those rolled into one. And the Black Lives Matter movement on top was a huge mobilization of people registering them to vote, led by Black activists. And obviously, a lot of Black Lives Matter activists are critical of Biden. But the case remained that that voter drive gave them that option of voting for the non-Trump candidate. And Biden was very lucky to be able to be the benefactor of that. And so then, as you can see in the street, for him and Kamala to then turn around and ignore Black Lives Matter, not return their letter, even
like instantly.
never mind give them platitudes, just ignore them.
Yeah,
is awful, and it's not surprising at all.
well, you didn't include this here, but I'm also just thinking about the so in the period between Biden winning and actually taking office, that sort of infamous leaked Zoom call, with the various like civil rights leaders, where he just again talk about sort of dog whistling and racial
the call with Clyburn.
Hmm?
It was the call with Clyburn and I don't remember everyone else in the meeting.
Yeah, there was a lot of
Sorry.
people there, but like he couldn't be like more condescending and more self-aggrandizing. He was basically saying like, I'm blacker than all of you. I've done more than all of you for civil rights. And it was just insane. I mean, we've covered that on the show here before, a little in depth anyway, but like, yeah, I mean, that's something I feel like people shouldn't forget either, because that was him being caught in a real candid moment, not realizing, that was going to go public. But yeah, even just I just feel like it syncs up well with this first entry about like the relationship to BLM, and how he's just basically saying like, I'm not going to have a politics of hate, but what he meant by that was like, I'm not going to vilify Trump or Nazis, basically, to some degree. Like he was basically saying, I mean, so much of what we're going to talk about can really be summed up in the classic, nothing will fundamentally change under my administration, including all the problems bound up with race in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Obama promised to prosecute Bush, then refused to. Biden never even bothered to promise to prosecute Trump and is now refusing to.
I think he maybe even said explicitly that he would not.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about that, but
I mean,
he did. He ran on saying he wouldn't, and Obama ran on saying he would. Both of them would. I honestly don't even know what's worse, saying you will and won't, or not even pretending to want to. But yeah, this is why things don't get better, because ultimately, despite all of their cosmetic differences, they protect their own, right? And so, him saying, "Oh, kumbaya," like we're all on the same team. I mean, that's him saying, "I don't give a shit." And you look at the MLK quotes about the white moderate. We all know it. The white moderate's the most dangerous because they're the ones standing in the middle saying, "No, like the oppressor's fine. Just be nice to him." You know what I mean? And that's, I can't think of anyone less suited to this moment in history. It hurts my soul to think like we had this huge political and social awakening last year, such a catalyst for change, and it's wasted on this administration. It's just heartbreaking.
And
what we could have accomplished.
And people think that like because and then I have to stand by and hear he's the next FDR, which every time I hear that I don't know whether to cry or scream or laugh. Like it's just so insane to me. But then on top of that, it's like this is the most progressive presidency of all time, and then this is the most progressive presidency of all time in terms of gender and race. And okay, on a very technical level, I suppose that might even be true. Mm-hmm. But then you look at who's probably the most powerful POC that he's installed. Board member of Raytheon heading up the Defense Department. I mean, it's beyond parody. It's insane.
It's that meme where non-distinct people in the Middle East, I don't know where it is, obviously, but these brown people are being droned, and they're saying, "Oh, I hear there's going to be sent by women this time. We're a part of history." I mean, that meme, switch out women with anything you want.
Yeah. I know this meme.
Yeah, that's the Democratic Party is diversifying the cruelty. It's the same way that anytime a police officer shoots someone, the police spokesperson is a black person because they're smart enough to pick someone.
That's always so just nauseating on top of nauseating that. I was gonna say that that particular meme though, the drone with like the gay pride flag on it, etc. Like, did you guys catch you must have seen like how that meme has just come to life?
Yeah, we tweeted about that.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought that was, I don't know, again, beyond parody. It's like what was it? I mean, it was like it was like the first gay helicopter crew or something. And like they're literally holding a gay pride flag in front of the helicopter that's meant to, destroy people.
And I mean, let's be clear for the people who are going to operate in bad faith. Like, obviously, diversity is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's when it is misappropriated and weaponized to cover for bad things is when it's offensive and when it's not a net positive. And I think most of the people who push back on this narrative, I think, get that nuance. They're just ignoring it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, though. Yeah, like, I mean, bring it back to the primaries, even like, who was? See, like, I don't remember any Sanders supporters like pushing the fact that he would be the first Jewish president, because that that's not the point, really. I mean, it would be great for representation wise, but the larger point was the policies, right? And but yet at the same time, like the sort of like whatever you want to call the this sort of opposing side, like the diversity above all, woke police, whatever. they don't stop for like a moment. Like what I'm saying is you could equally throw back in their face, like, what are you, like an anti-Semite? You don't like Bernie Sanders? In the
Mhm.
same way that anyone who criticized Warren was a misogynist, or anyone who criticized Kamala was racist and a misogynist. It's just,
Or if you criticize Warren, you're racist against indigenous people.
oh, right.
Right.
But that's the thing. I mean, Bernie had the most diverse coalition. He was the only candidate whose supporters were majority non-white. His supporters were majority women. He had more donations from women than any other candidate. I mean, he hit all the diversity points. He had the most Hispanic supporters. I mean, you can go on the list, most Asian American supporters, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And so, for me as a white man, I look at the people who are supporting which candidate, and I think these are the people that I want to be an ally to. These are the people I want to listen to. These are the people I want to stand by. And if all of these minority communities have selected this candidate, then that's because they believe that candidate's going to support them. And I want to support these communities over any surface level symbolic representation at the top. It's not who is the powerful person, it's what are they doing for those people who need it. And I think that that's something that, again, is just unfortunately unfairly weaponized. Um, and it's something that we need to push back on. So
Yeah, so it's weaponized, and then, I mean, not to mention just I guess this is a form of weaponization as well in a way, but like the really crass commercialization of Black Lives Matter. And that's actually some stuff I've only really kind of heard about, and I haven't really seen it, and I'm almost kind of glad I haven't had to have seen it. But like fast, correct me if I'm wrong, but like weren't like
A
fast food
lot of
places and shit like promoting Black Lives Matter, like
a
to
lot
sell
of
fucking
companies were
hamburgers?
coming out in support when the protests really, I mean, really started to get national coverage. A lot of companies came out in support, and some of it did seem a bit underhanded because it'd be like, here at McDonald's, actually, I don't know if McDonald's made a commercial. I'm sure they did,
I
just
think it
mentioning their
was like
support.
fast food companies and
And
stuff.
well, I know like Hasbro, the toy maker, came out in support. I know that a few other people did, but I mean, and I'm sure they do support it, but it was like timed in a way and advertised in a way that's like, is this just for business purpose, or is, I don't know.
Well, let's just see how that goes in the next 6 months to a year, when, as I think maybe we might all agree, um, the Biden administration is going to continue distancing itself from the movement. I don't think it's going to be as, in the interests of, various companies to use it that way. And I mean, there was the whole issue of like, just like celebrities like just going to Black Lives Matter protests and like taking selfies and stuff. And that's not like the most pressing issue in the world, but it is indicative of this whole problem, I think, of weaponizing identity politics, however you want to really sum it up.
well, I mean, ultimately what it comes down for me is just, are you putting your money where your mouth is? It's good that people are saying they support these things, but if they then balk at any of the actual material policies, any of the actual demands, then it's all performative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, if
You
that,
Which
right?
is why if McDonald's tweets hashtag BLM, you can call them on their bullshit immediately, because we know about their practices, their hiring practices, their crusade to stop raising the minimum wage at all costs. I mean, yeah, I mean, with certain companies, I think it's just. I mean, maybe I'm being a little knee jerk cynical about it, but it just seems obvious to me that it doesn't come from a sincere place.
Well,
Um,
like I said about the Black Lives Matter polling, you compare that to MLK. MLK is universally loved now, even by people who are pretending to love him despite their whole careers being in direct opposition to what he stood for. But at the time, I mean, his polling was terrible. MLK was majority like net disapproval in America at the time. And so you look at, you draw that sort of parallel to Black Lives Matter being very unpopular until the Trump era. That's why I think it'll be really telling to see what happens to their optics, if you want to say, with liberal leaning people, as they continue to do their job and they continue to advocate for the communities they're advocating for. Because you look at the next tweet, it talks about how Black Lives Matter is complaining that Biden's sending more military equipment to police than Trump was in the preceding months.
Yeah, it's hard for me to read, actually. I mean, just knowing that he is sending more military equipment to the police after like at least a year or more of hearing defund the police, which is what we should be doing, and seeing that they're increasing the budget, it's just like, it's maddening for me.
But so you have people who were in the streets saying defund the police, got people registered to vote, they voted for Biden. Now Biden's turning around, he's ignoring them, and he's sending more money and more weapons to the police than Trump was. And look at the other graph in this tweet. The reason why the police are militarized in the first place was because Obama and Biden did it. They started the trend. They got that massive peak on the line graph going. I mean, they're the ones who did it. And they did it for two reasons, one of which is clear in this tweet. The Occupy Wall Street, people of all races coming together to protest on a class basis. That's when they really started rolling in to crush those protests. You had Obama calling protesters thugs. You had the Obama sending the National Guard in, brutalizing people so badly that some undercover cops actually sued their own police force, I believe, because they were getting that. And so, and then the second reason being they wanted to spend more money in the military, but they already had all the weapons they needed. So they had to give them to someone else so that they could buy more weapons.
Yeah. And also, I'd always heard that a lot of it was just like military runoff, that like they had spent so much money on military weapons that they needed a way for, to continue buying. And they figured out like a system for the police departments to basically buy the weapons from the military that the military had bought from the weapon manufacturers, which is like some weird cycle of like just the government, like, I don't know.
Although they also have no problem just letting stuff sit and rot and turn to rust. But like, I see your point as well. But it is interesting to go back to Occupy Wall Street to see that as like sort of the beginning of this huge ramping up. But yeah, if you do take a look at this graph of militarizing the police, it's a pretty stark, obvious thing to see where it really spiked up.
And this is not to say that Trump did not continue doing this and that Trump did not do it a lot also. I mean, this is all true.
Key word there, though, is continue, I feel like, or an important word there.
Right. And this is one of those things that a lot of people my age don't necessarily know the nuances of the Obama administration. So they look at what Biden's doing and they think, oh, he inherited this mess from Trump. And not to give Trump any credit, because he is also bad, obviously. But a lot of what Trump was doing, he inherited from Obama, because the dude was too incompetent to really do a whole lot on his own. And we'll get into more of this as we get further down. But a lot of the bad things that Trump did were already happening. Trump just continued them in a more ham-fisted, obvious way. which brought a lot of attention to it. And ultimately, that's the whole purpose of this account, is to say, look, bad things are still bad when your guy's doing them. None of this went away just because Trump did. And so hopefully, begging people to keep that same energy they had last summer, begging them to stay engaged and aware and outraged, with as many screenshots as I have to tweet. So that's one of the egregious things, though, is Biden even had the gall to say that he promised an executive order to rein in militarization of the police, which, again, caveat, the reining in was returning to the Obama standards, which, as we saw, were also very bad on this issue. But he couldn't even do that, didn't even follow through with that. And as far as I can tell, there's been little to no press coverage about this at all, despite, again, the fact that defund the police movement got him in office.
Well, I think for some people, actually, I think for a lot of people, that Trump was the bad guy and now the good guy's in the White House. So everything is fixed or being fixed.
Yeah, I mean, it's that very typical, but there's a lot of truth to it, trope, like people just are desperate to go back to bed or brunch, however you want to put it. And it's like very obviously happening. I wanted to just mention, though, too, that so they did defund the police with Biden. there's some of these things, yes, Biden very much so like promised and broke his promise about and lied about, just, because Biden has no problem with just lying right to people's face and so on. But when it does come to defunding the police, as far as I know, he was pretty clear about, I'm not going to defund the police. But I guess he did maybe make a more specific promise about demilitarizing. Is what?
Yeah, he did promise that very, very milquetoast, like, reform on police militarization that probably wouldn't have done anything anyway. It's really just like he broke this promise to even do this inadequate thing. But yeah, a lot of what we tweet is saying, oh, he promised this and he didn't do it. But a lot of what we tweet is he's doing this bad thing. And people will reply, well, he didn't promise to do the good thing. It's like, okay, well, he's still doing the bad thing. It's not all broken promises. He didn't bother to pretend to be good on every issue. And yeah, he did run on giving the police 300 million more. And during the general election, he went after Trump, saying Trump wasn't pro-police enough, which was very
yeah. I remember when they were both arguing about who's more law and order than the other. It was hilarious to see two senile men yelling law and order at each other.
It's been said before, but I wish so badly that Biden was who Republicans pretend he is.
Oh yeah,
me too.
Yeah, just a complete socialist. Yeah.
But it segues nicely into the next one, that the George Floyd Act that Biden is saying that he's prepared to sign gives police $750 million more to investigate themselves. And, this is in direct contradiction with the Breathe Act. I can't breathe act, or I think it's the Breathe Act, I think is what the one was called. I don't remember exactly what they called it.
It's something like that,
act.
yeah.
I think it was the I can't breathe.
Yeah. But that bill was much, much, much better. And so, you say in a vacuum, I oppose the George Floyd Act. Obviously sounds bad, just like saying I oppose the Patriot Act was intended to sound bad. But it's just sickening to use his name again, to push this agenda that A, would not have saved his life, and B, gives more money to the people who killed him. And he was killed because police were called, accusing him of faking a payment that he would have, if he did do it. I don't know if he did it or not, doesn't matter. But if he did do it, it was because he didn't have enough money. So, why not give that money to these communities that are struggling, and then getting the cops called on them and killed by them for that impoverished trap that they obviously are in. So it's just demoralizing. It's just upsetting, because obviously it does not bring me joy to read the George Floyd Act and discover, oh, this is actually bad. I want it to be good. I want the police bill that we're voting on right now to be good. But it's not. And that needs to be said, even though it's an uncomfortable thing. But, the other graph in this tweet is that the US police has more money than every military force in the world, except for ours and China's.
Right.
Why are we giving more money to the third largest military in the world? It's just,
I guess the same reason we're giving even more money to the largest military in the world.
Yeah. So it's, it's disappointing. And a lot of, very progressive politicians are supporting this, and I get why they're doing that. But it's just, it's not the right thing to do. But it looks good enough and sounds good enough that it's what's going to happen, to great aplomb, I'm sure. So
I just don't understand what looks good enough about it. It's like, I just keep thinking, like, if I were writing like a dystopian novel and I came up with this idea of, like, what if I called a bill to give the police tons more money, the George Floyd Act, I'd be like, that's too on the nose. That's a little clunky. Like, it's just too obviously evil. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's really disgusting. Just, and like you said, it's this way of like, oh, you're opposed to the George Floyd Act? Like, just, stop at the name. Don't look at the details. That, again, that's similar phenomenon to what we were just talking about like using, what's the word I'm looking for? Representation, like, as cover for, all manner of evil stuff. So, Um, let's see. What is next on the agenda?
So then the next one, yeah, segueing again into, he's got the 750 million to give to the police, which obviously don't need it, but he fails at giving money to average people. This one's been beaten to the ground.
Yeah.
I just cannot believe that people are still pretending that he didn't promise to give people a third check equal to $2,000. We've all seen the picture of the check that says $2,000 on it.
Yeah.
We all know that the preceding 600 hit our bank accounts before this promise happened. We all know it's absurd to think that Donald Trump was kind enough to put the deposit down on Biden's stimulus bill. I mean, there's everything that possibly could be said about this has already been said. And the fact that he's got a majority in the House and the Senate, the easiest dunk ever, giving people more money than Trump did. And he can't even do that because 17 million fewer people received anything. I didn't have room to put this in there, but he set the limit, I believe, was 75K. And I believe the average nurse makes something like 76K. So he even set the limit for income to where the average nurse will not get the full amount. And also he has it means tested based on the previous tax return so that if you were unemployed all of 2020, but you had a job in 2019, you don't get anything.
Which I'm sure happened quite a few people.
So a lot of people.
Of course. I mean, the fact that they were even doing that in during the first stimulus check was bad enough. And that was back in March of 2020. But yeah, once you hit 2021 and you're still going off of the 2019 tax returns, you can't tell me there's any other reason beyond just trying to screw people out of money.
And, you can say, oh, he's trying to buy votes. Buy our votes. Do it. You know what I mean? You're buying everyone else's votes. It's just, I was in Georgia during the runoffs. And I saw the signs. I saw the people. I saw it all happen. I saw the TV ads. He made a promise, and poor Warnock is probably going to get wrecked in his next election because
certainly.
It's so demoralizing to think that the Democrats are always going to probably lose the midterms. But now so many congressional Dems are going to lose their seats because Biden fucked up again, and they ran on this and they aren't able to deliver now. And a lot of them, I believe, are too scared to step out of line and say anything about it.
Oh yeah. None of them are coming.
I was going to say, I think some of their analysts also tells them that the means testing looks good to some people because I know that
but to who?
I hate to use my dad as an example, but he doesn't make enough money. I mean, he's comfortable, but he's still got the stimulus check, which he didn't need. And he's the type of person I don't need this. Why are they giving this to everyone? This is crazy. But at the same time, that's not really the point. The point is that it probably helps most people. And why not just give it to most people? Because if you start means testing it, you exclude lots of people who probably do need it just because there's one or two people that are just getting extra.
Mm-hmm.
There are really simple solutions to it. Okay, if people got it who earned over $150,000 a year, you basically take it out of their net taxes the next time around. There's all sorts of obvious, easy solutions. And I was going to mention Jason had a great theory about why Biden did this. It's he was trying to teach the nation arithmetic. 1,400 plus 600 is 2,000.
I cannot believe that people are shameless enough to even say that.
I think I had to stop using Twitter for 2 weeks during that time because I kept seeing people sincerely making that as an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you get simple math?
You could do a whole podcast on why means testing is bad because you spend more money trying to do the bureaucracy bit than you save not sending it to everybody. And obviously give it to everybody because you should be taxing the rich who don't need it to pay for it in the first place. Even if they get the check, they've spent more in taxes than the check to pay for other people's checks. I mean, it's all bullshit, obviously. But like you said, yeah, to have people say, "Oh, don't you understand math?" And especially my favorite, "Oh, you're privileged if you critique Biden." I didn't need the $2,000. I'm upset about this because I know a lot of people who did and they didn't get it. You're privileged if you think 1,400 is enough. You know what I mean? Like, if it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, if the $600 doesn't matter to you, then you are doing well off enough where you don't have an opinion on this.
I mean, frankly, you're privileged if you think that one $2,000 check is enough. I mean, like I'm of the mind that there should have been retroactive checks all the way back to March 2019 or 2020, and
Mm-hmm.
checks going forward until like there was like scientific consensus that the pandemic is over. Because, I mean, we've got something planned for this later, but like, you know, just print the money, all right? Like you can afford to make the police the third largest military in the world. Like, I think we can help people out.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you've seen the interview with, I think it was Bernanke, sorry, who was like, yeah, we go in the computer and we get the number, we make the number bigger. And the interviewer was like, what? And he's like, yeah, you just go in the computer and you just make the number bigger. And it's like, okay, do that for us. Make
Yeah,
the
yeah.
number smaller for other people, and make the number bigger for normal people. Like, if it's that easy,
Some of
then
these people who are absolutely fine with giving trillions of dollars to banks that don't need it, like that's when like monetary or sorry, a modern monetary theory comes into play. But when it comes to people getting $2,000 a month, oh no, well, where are we gonna find the funds? We can't afford it.
I mean, I think some of the worry for, I'm not saying this makes it right, just clear it out, but I think that they do worry about the optics of giving people money because, like, at least in their heads, they feel like the voting base, like the people who really come out and vote in every election, are people who don't necessarily like handouts.
It's that, but I think even more than that. I think the biggest reason is they don't want to show that it's possible, because then they can't hide behind this. You know, where are we going to find the money? And then, you know, like, then suddenly Medicare for all doesn't seem like such an outrageous idea to maybe the average person. They're like, oh, well, hey, we all got checks. Like, why can't we get all this other great stuff that we've been told is pie in the sky? And they won't have an excuse at that point.
I mean, that's a good point though about the pride of some people who either genuinely or not claim that they don't want handouts. Again, I grew up in a very, very poor, rural, deep South area. I get that. I understand that. I know people who are that way. And I'm not saying that Bernie would have won South Carolina, but I do believe that for every 10 conservatives who rail against social welfare policy, large percentage of them, they go in a ballot booth, they're going to put that person who's going to give them that money. They're going to vote for the person who meets their material needs, helps them put food on the table. They don't give a shit about Russia.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
true.
Like, at the end of the day, even if publicly they say, oh, this guy is a socialist, I hate him, some of them are going to vote for the socialist who's going to make their life less miserable. And they may never admit it. But ultimately, they don't need to, you know. And I think if we start running candidates who will meet these people's material needs, we will win votes. And that's, I mean, if Bernie can go on Fox News and get a Fox audience to clap for Medicare for all, if he can get miners in West Virginia to clap for his agenda,
Yeah.
then, you know, politicians running on social welfare policy can win votes.
Oh,
I
but
agree.
didn't you hear, Bernie, bro? He lost. He lost fair and square to the better man, Biden. There was no outside influence that swept in and pushed his decrepit ass over the finish line. That's another like all too common thing you have to see online is like, didn't you get the memo? Your guy lost. It's like, thanks for reminding me of how corrupt everything is.
Yeah, I mean, like, fuck me for still having the same principles despite the election being over. Despite, it's like it's almost like it's more than that.
I thought also like I agree with your point that like people there's a like a discrepancy between what people will profess publicly and what they'll do in the voting booth. And I was just thinking of like, some people say, I don't want handouts, but like Bernie's messaging, and I'm not gonna like just sit here and geek out on Bernie Sanders, but like he had a great message for that. It was like the classic thing: we have socialism for the rich and nothing for the working class, basically. And that's like a simple message that people can understand. Like even the most quote unquote like backwards person, um, deplorable, whatever, understands that it was bullshit that banks got bailed out and normal people didn't. Like everyone gets that basically. So I guess that's just kind of a side point there, but
Well,
and
speaking of bailing people out, the next
yeah,
one
yeah.
being student debt. Biden promised he would forgive some, isn't really doing anything about that. But the big thing, which didn't get enough coverage, is that he actually backed Betsy DeVos in her lawsuit against a bunch of students she defrauded. And so if you see the graph of all the federal owned student debt and
Mhm.
the tiny bit Biden canceled, he fought in court against doing and lost. He took Betsy
Jesus.
DeVos aside and they were beaten by the students and the students got their money back. Um, and again, this is another issue that you could do an entire separate podcast
And
on,
this
but
was like the students who had went to like if I remember right, this was the lawsuit for the students that went to like tech schools for like Trump University, right? Like the just like real bottom of the barrel ITT tech, like you see the commercials for that are super expensive and
it was
often
some for-profit
yeah,
institution. Yeah.
that's what I was looking for profit institutions, but I always associate them with like these ITT tech commercials I would see growing up and being like, get your engineering degree in 2 years,
Yeah.
guaranteed
You are fun.
job.
Those are all the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could only fit one of the stats in here that canceling all student debt would reduce the black to white racial wealth gap from 12 to 1 to 5 to 1. And we talk about reparations, which is something that we absolutely need. Separate from reparations, the fastest way to fix the racial wealth gap, the number one, easiest, simplest, quickest thing you could do to make the largest impact in Black communities, canceling student debt. Which is why it's just so egregious that people say, "Oh, it's only white people have student debt, or only rich people have student debt." It's just bullshit. Um, but the other stats are, it's something like 300,000 more people would buy homes a year. I mean, the GDP would go up a huge amount as well. I mean, there's just staggering stats, and debt jubilees is something that happened a lot. I mean, there's a huge precedent for this.
Yeah.
Biden can do it with a sign of his pen. Um, and it costs the government a lot of money to hold on to and chase these loans. So it just blows my mind that other countries basically pay you to go to school, and our country's saddling huge swaths of the population with just disastrous debt
Yeah, they're
to try to.
just ruining people's lives. I mean,
How are we going to beat China if our people can't go to school? Right? I mean, any people
yeah,
you want to say.
there's so many ways you could spin that, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's something that would be very easy to spin to be like, hey, if we want to continue being the number one nation or whatever, we have to educate everyone. I mean, I would love for the student debt to be erased for personal reasons and just like I didn't realize it would until looking through your tweets. I had no clue about the how like much of the wealth gap it would actually close in between the 12 to 1 to 5 to 1. That's actually amazing to me, but just I think the people that get really hurt by student debt are generally just people who've been taught through public school that they have to go to university. And I think everyone should if they have the chance. But also, like, if you come from a family who doesn't have a lot of money and it's easy to take out student loans, I know because I took out a lot of student loans, paying them back's the harder part. Um,
Yep.
you know,
I'm
and
just
it's like a
Mostly
trap.
women. It's yeah. I mean, the debt is largely held with women, minorities. I'm cheating here because I'm looking at a note that I wrote. It's something like Yeah, here we go. A new poll showed that 40% of Black voters would be unwilling to vote for candidates who oppose eliminating student debt. I mean, it's just it truly is so frustrating to see people say, "Oh, only rich white people do this." Well, if that's the case, it's because everyone else can't afford to go in the first place, or they're too scared to take out the debt in the first place, which is not an accurate representation of the situation. That it's mostly white and rich people. But
Rich
of course,
people, rich people are not being crushed by student debt because they just paid out of pocket to go to go to school. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument.
oh, here it is. I found this is other stuff I couldn't fit into that tweet. 4.4 million jobs would be created in the first 5 years, which is because, if you go into debt to be a dentist or a doctor or whatever, that's when they say, oh, these rich people are, well, that's who they're referring to. Well, those people's debt getting canceled will allow them to hire more people for their practice. So everyone always likes to say, oh, give the rich a tax break because it'll create jobs. It's almost never true. This is the one instance where that is actually kind of true and no one's saying it.
And it would it would
bad
be kind of a side benefit to the central benefit, which is just alleviating some of the tremendous pressure off of people's backs, like on an individual level.
Here we go. The GDP would go up 86 to 108 billion per year.
You think conservatives would be all over that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we could talk about this all day. I mean, the average student, the stats are done. The average student owns over 30K. 40% of students could default by 2023, and 20 states can suspend your license if you fall behind on payments. And these are stats before the pandemic, so they're almost certainly worse now. Yeah. But 84% of Black voters support debt cancellation. It's a majority overall. Like I said, you're way more likely to have to take out loans if you are Black or Hispanic. There's no argument against it other than I got mine, fuck you, which is equivalent of saying, I got COVID, so no one else should get the vaccine for free. I mean, there's just no moral or financial argument against it. But I mean, again, this is who Biden's always been. He spent his career working for credit card companies, working for Navient, the student loan company. They got sued for defrauding a bunch of students. They're my student loan provider. They donated a bunch to Biden because they're based in Delaware. He's the one who made the bankruptcy bill that made it harder for students to declare bankruptcy. So again, people acting surprised that he is who he's always said he is, who he's always been.
If I had the option, I would have filed for bankruptcy on my student loans a long time ago. But anyway.
And look, I mean, I'm lucky. I got a really good job out of college and I've paid off a lot of mine. Not all of them, but I've been lucky that I've been able to pay off a lot of them. So again, it's like people have to say, oh, you're privileged if Biden's not good enough for you. Well, again, I'm going to be fine without debt cancellation, but I know a lot of people who aren't. And those are the people who don't have the privilege to think Biden's good enough for them because they're drowning in debt. and that's why I'm indignant about this sort of thing, because he's suckered in all these people into voting for him thinking that he would materially benefit their lives, and he's refusing to do so. And he can do this without looking at a single Republican. Doesn't have to talk to us. Just executive order, federal debt's gone. I mean, these are things that he can do. And if people are angry about it, it's because they don't realize that it's that easy.
Well, and then when he was proposing, like, I mean, we can move on to the next topic pretty soon here, but like, so there was like the Liz Warren and Chuck Schumer proposal of like eliminating up to $50,000 in debt, and it was all very dependent on like means testing as well. I mean, it's very imperfect, but I guess I mean that would eliminate my college debt completely, but Biden didn't even like give that even a second look. Like, he just immediately rejected it and said, we'll think about 10 grand. And then even that just immediately fell by the wayside as a, I mean, of course it was like his press secretary speaking for him saying like, well, in this climate with Congress the way it is, Biden wants everything to be bipartisan, therefore he's not going to use any sort of executive orders. And that's, I mean, that's just that is a pattern we'll see throughout pretty much almost all of these issues, is that Biden will sometimes claim to, oh, I desperately want that, but I'd have to use an executive order, and I don't like those. Well, except for all these ones that I've actually issued that just don't really help anyone. But yeah, I mean, it's all very obviously corrupt in my mind, and I think Liz Warren is still like pushing the $50,000 thing, but you know, like Biden has said, like he's on the things that actually matter. He's not going to use executive orders. So
That's the core of it. I mean, people suffered and died because Trump did whatever he wanted to do, broke the rules, did whatever he wanted to do, and people are going to continue to suffer and die because Biden refuses to do anything.
yeah,
And
no one's even asking him to break the rules. Like this is within his purview. He can eliminate federal student loan debt, like you said, with a stroke of a pen, and just plain refuses to, under this guise of ridiculous, like, well, I'm gonna be a president for everyone. Like, I only want to do things that Congress can agree on. It's like, what planet do you live on? I
well,
mean,
that's the frustrating thing is because, I mean, he's not going to be around that much longer, right? I
yeah,
mean, if he wanted to, he could do a complete about face and do a bunch of great things and go down as a hero. I mean, if he could cancel our student debt, raise minimum wage, help push through Medicare expansion, do all these things, even people like me who run a fucking account talking about how he's bad would be like, wow, that was amazing. He did it. I can't believe it. Like,
I,
that's fantastic. Like, we don't want him to be bad so that we can tweet. We want him to do good things. And
I would totally give him credit, and I talk massive amounts of shit about him.
yeah,
Um,
it's like even if it's an ego thing, even if he doesn't actually give a shit about any of us, even if he just wants to be liked, like,
yeah,
how craven do you have to be where it's like Bezos? Like, why doesn't Bezos end world hunger? Right? It's like
yeah.
you could do something that's within your ability, and you would be loved forever.
I mean, why doesn't he just at least pay his employees more?
Yeah, like,
Bezos, but I mean, ending world hunger would be great. As I almost said, world hunger,
but
but
I don't know. It just frustrates me because it's like, why go through all the effort of faking things so that people think you're good? Why not just be good? But anyway, that's, we can't get into a moral conversation about a career politician at 50 years. If we want
Yeah,
to say the next thing about the $15 minimum wage,
I do just want to add though that that's an important point about the media and the way fellow Democrats are talking about Biden. And I know this is kind of like the way we were gonna end things, but like, if you're already being called the next FDR, like, why would he want to even do anything different? He's getting what he wants, and like, so, and it means he doesn't care about reality. Like, he thinks in his mind, he's like, I'm gonna go down in the history books as FDR part two.
yeah.
I mean, who knows what's going on in his mind? I mean, I'm not gonna.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I believe Obama really, really, really put his thumb on the scales and circled the wagons around Biden to stop Bernie from becoming the nominee. Because if Bernie became president and did
it
all the
would
stuff Obama said he couldn't do,
it
that's a
would mess
huge
up his legacy.
legacy. Yeah. And then people will be like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe he wasn't that good. Maybe he wasn't trying that hard. All this stuff was possible. We didn't know. And unfortunately, that's something that I'm inclined to think that they grapple with. Um, but we talk about the rules, right? $15 minimum wage. He promised he was the only one pragmatic enough to bring people together to get that done.
Yeah,
Didn't get a single Republican vote, and took out his own minimum wage before he even got to the bargaining table because his own parliamentarian from his own party made a non-binding advisement that it wasn't allowed. Schumer could have fired her. Kamala Harris could have overruled her. But what did they do? Biden privately told people beforehand, this isn't going to work. I'm not even going to try. It's just there for looks. It didn't go through.
yeah. It
Uh,
was it was very absurd. But hey, the nation learned what a parliamentarian is.
I mean,
This
30
is
million people, 30 million, I think it's 30 million people on minimum wage who, we called them essential workers. He told them they don't deserve a raise, and it's just maddening because You look at all these fast food companies that are bribing people to apply for jobs by saying they'll give them a free sandwich, give them $50, whatever. Um, you apply, they offer you $8, you don't want to take it, they report you, and then you lose your unemployment. And Saki says no one's able to no one's allowed to turn down a suitable job. So he may say you need $15 an hour, but ultimately he believes that starvation wages are a suitable job, and he's fine with corporations extorting you on that basis. And that's just not good enough.
And I mean, just like another, kick in the face on top of many kicks in the face that these like fast food companies in particular do is, they'll give you 38 hours a week, so you just barely can't qualify for any sort of full-time benefits. Yeah, it's criminal. Well, I mean, it should be.
Well, that's the thing. You can appeal to the moral argument, or you can appeal to the financial argument. And I think one thing that progressives fail on a little bit is we talk about the moral imperative of Medicare for all.
Yeah.
And we do talk about the financial aspect, but we don't hit the angle that opposing Medicare for all is anti-small business, because small businesses have to pay for your benefits and your healthcare, right?
Right.
They do their whole scheduling so that you don't qualify for it. And so if the government handles healthcare, the small businesses don't have to worry about paying for your benefits. They don't have to worry about setting you up with these private insurers. So,
which also frees them up to pay people more money.
Right. So it's just, I think it's an opportunity, because people say, oh, we can't raise minimum wage because then these people have to pay more wages. Well, it's like, you don't care when they have to pay for your healthcare.
Right.
Why are anti-Medicare for all folks not branded as bad against business?
Well, I mean, and of course this is wrong and idiotic, but they would fire back something like, well, their taxes are going to go up tremendously, which is, the opposite. Like, it's when you factor in everything together, yes, some people are going to pay more in taxes, some corporations are going to pay more in taxes, a certain income bracket's going to pay more in taxes, but it balances out on the whole to where we're saving a ton of money, like everybody is. Yeah, I mean, I agree, like, because if you are going to argue with, like, whatever, libertarians or right wingers of any sort, you can't even really bother with the moral argument in a way. You do kind of have to just appeal to their pocketbook. And the thing is you can, and that was another thing that I thought Sanders was good at cutting to in really simple language. But again, people are so sort of primed to be against any socialized medicine, however they want to phrase it, that, a lot of times it's in more.
We'll get to that one, actually. I don't want to interject. That's coming up, actually.
Yeah. I think, I mean, let's just get into it. Yeah. I mean, healthcare.
Well, real quick, before we skip over this one, he cut childhood poverty in half.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's based on the $15 minimum wage being in the bill, which of course it wasn't in the bill. And his benefits expire in 7 months. So yeah, if you want to say you cut poverty in half for temporarily, then sure, but you didn't actually do anything structural. It's just a stopgap. And the big kicker that no one's talking about is how he actually reduced the rate of relief going to working class and elderly people based on what Trump had been doing, which is just, again, mind blowing. I mean, just the resentment that he has for working people is staggering. But yeah, if we want to jump into the healthcare one, he proposed lowering the Medicare eligibility age to 60, which is to the right of Hillary, even who ran on 55.
Yeah, 55, right.
He's made no move to do that, has made no move to do the public option, said he would veto Medicare for all. There's a really creative way to read some of the fine print that says that he actually could use an executive order to give Medicare for people who are victimized by a public health crisis, which of course COVID very much is a public health crisis. So there's a school of thought that he could do Medicare for all, or at least Medicare for many people unilaterally in that way. But I mean, what do we get? We get him enriching private health insurance companies by subsidizing them with tax dollars, which is infuriating. Terrible. So Cobra is going to get richer to cover a few people again for a few months temporarily, but he's missing, again, just like the Black Lives Matter movement was a huge opportunity. We have a huge opportunity to reform healthcare, and he's simply choosing not to do it, which
I
is,
believe Cobra was subsidized an amount of money that was like almost double the amount of money that would end world hunger.
I don't know.
I think it was something to that effect. I mean, there's different estimates about ending world. The point is that Cobra did not need whatever it was, like $52 billion or something that was in that last bill. Yeah,
But I mean, go on, even on Fox News polls that are very slanted to the right, they still show Medicare for all getting majority support. And this is, again, is another classic thing where it's like the most popular programs in America are Social Security, because we all pay into them. We all feel ownership of them. We all are helped by them. And Medicare for all, polling as well as it does, despite all the unfounded slander it gets, all the incorrect propaganda against it, I truly believe a lot of people will say they don't like it, but would vote for it. And a lot of people who won't vote for it certainly like it once they get it. And I compare it to the NHS in the UK. Winston Churchill, I don't know if you know this, but Winston Churchill was a war hero, obviously, after World War II. He campaigned running for prime minister against NHS, saying that labor socialism was going to have Gestapo in the streets. Labor won, instituted the NHS. When Winston Churchill then became prime minister later, didn't touch it, refused to touch it. So the same guy who's saying Gestapo in the streets if you have healthcare refused to touch because it was too popular.
Yeah.
And so we need to get ourselves to a place where someone sticks their neck out and implements positive policy that then becomes so popular that not only will, just like generations of people were lifetime Democrats because of FDR, you would have lifetime loyalty to Democrats by a generation of people, and you would have Republicans scared to chip away at that. And that's ultimately the kind of hump that we need to get over. And Biden could do it, but he just doesn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, he's very explicitly said he would. I mean, he's saying that if the will of the people and like the entire Congress came through and it made it to his desk, he'd toss it in the trash, like it's, I don't know why that's not a deal breaker for more people, but I mean, I guess Trump derangement syndrome, I guess, is really it.
I feel like that's why I supported Bernie. I actually believed that he would do that, that he would make policies in such a way that people would be like, our lives are actually better. And it's
yeah. I think if Medicare for all were passed, it would be here to stay, at least, for the foreseeable future. I mean, in the way that Social Security has stayed around, even though like you still get, well, hey, shit, we're talking about Biden. I mean, Biden tried to chip away at Social Security too, quite a bit, but like
he still thinks that he might do it.
And but the idea of just like ending the program outright, I think is like, I think there would be riots in the street. I mean, maybe actually or just metaphorically, but.
Well, and you mentioned Bernie's policies. People say that he couldn't do what he wanted to do, but we believe that he would actually have fought for it. And he ran when they said, "How are you going to pass Medicare for all?" He said, "Well, my VP will override the parliamentarian." A year before anyone even knew the parliamentarian was, he was saying, "This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do." Right?
Yeah.
So now you've got Biden saying he believes in $15 $15 minimum wage. The parliamentarian overrules him. He's like, "Oh no, my hands are tied." Right? So it's like, there's a difference between saying you'll do something and saying how you'll do it because you believe in it so much. And again, I'm not saying Bernie would have passed it, but I knew he would have tried his best, whereas Biden clearly is not doing that.
Yeah,
so that's what's frustrating, especially because the primary election was decided on electability and ability to get things done ostensibly, and they said Biden could do it and Bernie couldn't. And objectively, demonstrably, we're seeing that Bernie's strategy would have gotten us much closer, if not all the way there.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem even before you get to the who would have done it better is that Biden was never in favor of a lot of the good policies that Bernie is. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we should push on here.
Yeah,
I mean, this one just makes me laugh. Joe Biden promises to cure cancer, and shut the fuck up. Like, come
People
on.
love to reply angrily to me. It's like, oh, you're mad you didn't cure cancer in 100 days. Well, it's like, okay, first of all, you got to count the days starting somewhere. Even if he was going to cure cancer, yeah, it's reasonable to think he wouldn't do it in 100 days. This is clearly to juxtapose with him saying you can't have healthcare, but I'm going to cure cancer. And it's especially egregious considering, again, it's a lot of stuff that's in the list that I put out that's not in this thread. But Biden personally fought to keep cancer medications from being affordable to other countries that are poorer. And he said that we can't all have healthcare because it would be an insult to his dead son. I mean, they're just disgusting.
Oh my God.
Disgusting.
Yeah, that's I remember I
that's a
told you that.
classic on our podcast, is that particular quote of Biden's. When Jason told me that, I hadn't heard it for some reason, and I just didn't believe it was real.
Yeah, you thought I made it up. I was like, oh no, he really said this. It's like, no, you're making that up. It's like, no.
Yeah. So it's like, well, why not just make it so people who have cancer now can afford the treatment that exists now? You know, like, why condemn them to die a slow, financially destructive life?
The other thing about that, though, is that when his son was being treated, apparently even Joe Biden, who you would presume has a bit of personal wealth, couldn't afford the medical bills and got a personal friendly loan from Obama to pay Bo's medical bills.
Awful.
Isn't that insane? So it's like, not only is he like heartlessly denying all these, huge numbers of people like dignity and medical care, but he should have at least some sense of going through his own issue. But I guess we're all not, best friends with the president who can loan us $200,000 or whatever.
And for the people hate listening, I do think it's good that he got the best healthcare he could get. I just want that for everyone else too.
Yeah.
So we're not saying.
Oh, his son. Oh, sure. Yeah.
But yeah. Again, like I said, there's always a moral argument, and then there's a sort of logistical one. And in so many of these, it's just, you cannot justify either. And it's just frustrating.
Just the insult to my dead son thing. It boggles my mind. I don't understand why that's not. I mean, we could say this about every single item we're going through. These could each be an episode by themselves, but like, you could even just do a whole episode on on the dead son memory quote. Oh no, I was gonna say, if you take any kind of quote unquote gaffe that Biden has ever made in his life, and I like to play the game Imagine Bernie said that, and what kind of outrage would have erupted. Like any one of them, just one by itself, like he would have been canceled immediately. Somehow Biden has Teflon protection. So
I really wish that I've thought about this a lot. Take a bunch of Biden voters and put them in a room, do some focus group thing where it's like, what would you say or do or think if you're running against a Republican who did this and that and that and this and that? Get their response, and they'd be like, "Oh, actually, that was Biden." You know what I mean? And do that sort of classic switch. Because again, I don't think all people who vote for Biden or Trump inherently agree with all the things that either of those two people did.
No.
But a lot of the time, it's because they just don't know. And again, I've wasted way too much time running this account, so I understand how much work it puts into discovering some of these things.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah, I mean, the next one, the COVID thing, again, this is another thing that everyone's discussed at great length. Biden copied Trump's pandemic strategy of containment as opposed to elimination, which has been disastrous. He promised a nationwide mask mandate, which of course he never attempted to do, and people will say that he can't do it, but obviously the president can pressure state and local governments into doing something. He didn't even try, and if he couldn't do, why would he promise it? And he said, listen to scientists. Scientists said national shutdown, pay people to stay home. He refused to do that.
Even someone on his own advisory board of scientists, at least one of them said a lockdown was absolutely necessary, and that was back in November, I think.
Yeah, so it's just frustrating. I've been on federal property, and they're not even wearing masks in federal property, even though he did the federal property one. It's just not being enforced. just, he didn't, all he's done that's different is now he's wearing a mask and now he's vaccinated. He doesn't even need to really in a lot of the situations that he's in.
Mm.
So it's just, it's more performative misdirection, which is just really frustrating.
And there is a recent update on something related to, I mean, it's related to the vaccine in particular, but like his refusal to try to lift the patent on the vaccine. I guess now he's
because he initially promised that he would waive the patents, and he's now just said that he will a couple days ago.
yeah, and
But at the time he wasn't doing it, and he hasn't done it yet, so he may still not do it.
yeah, he hasn't done it, and what it actually, I mean, I want to say okay. I mean, it is a step in the right direction. Credit where credit's due, but I also am immediately suspicious of like, is he saying this because it won't happen? And my understanding is that the World Trade Organization is going to be debating about this for like months because they have to have a perfect consensus to actually lift these patents.
There's a crisis going on right now. I mean, there's not time for months of debate.
There's not at all. I mean, like, and the thing is that there were groups in South Africa and India, as at least as far back, if not farther back. I know for sure in like last fall, like last November, maybe even before, that were making a big point about this, saying like, if we're allowed to like engineer the vaccine, like get around the patent, like this will help us greatly. And now look, India is like arguably the worst place in the world for COVID at the moment.
Yeah, I mean the death rate now is worse than it's ever been because of the crisis in India. And again, this is another thing that he has claimed that he will reverse in the last few days. But at the time of writing this, in 100 days, his ban on exporting even the raw materials caused this crisis in India. And you look at how Pfizer is extorting poorer nations, saying, give us these military bases and other assets to secure a vaccine deal.
Jeez, I didn't even know that one.
Yeah, it's just cruelty. And again, you want to compare to FDR. FDR forced Big Pharma to give up the medicine to other countries. I mean, that's the precedent. The precedent's there. It's happened before. The person who we compare Biden to did it, So at least, again, and this is another thing too. People love to say, oh, you're lying on this account because he did this and he said he wasn't doing it. Well, it's like, I'm not saying that I pushed Biden left, obviously, but everyone complaining about how he wasn't doing the right thing, pressured him into doing the right thing. So get on board with that complaint also, as opposed to saying, oh, he's actually good, he did it.
I made a joke about that to Jason the other day because we just did an episode where we were going on about the patent thing, and like the next day it was like, Biden vows to lift the patent. I'm like, hey, we've got listenership, eh? But
so we just got to keep sounding the alarm about these sorts of things. And again, I'm not saying that my Twitter account has done a drop in the ocean, but if you get that international community talking about stuff, you're more likely to see a change. And so obviously Biden is not going to respond to, oh, please, sir, we love you, help us out.
I think a lot of politicians are motivated by saving face. And if you like call them out on like things that they are definitely doing wrong, then it's more likely that they'll change course. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it has to reach certain like fever pitch for depending on the politician, but like, yeah, for sure. I mean, but that's kind of the depressing thing about these ancient politicians that seem to run everything now, like Nancy Pelosi and so on. Like, I don't know if like Nancy Pelosi would be responsive so much to like real pressure, because I mean, she has a really low approval rating anyway, but she's like, she
the most powerful person in Congress,
but she could also just like quit at any time. Like, I mean, she's so ancient now. Like, I don't know if she would actually use her power for good at this point.
It was lower than Trump's, and I think, or she had fewer people percentage-wise said they trusted her than Trump.
Yeah, it's either approval rating or trustworthiness, something like that. Yeah.
And she was responding to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter as recently as 1 or 2 years ago, and now she's
Yeah.
wearing the traditional African garb. It's
Oh
just
my
That
God,
picture.
man.
Oh, that picture.
You can't not mention her shouting to the sky about George Floyd being a wonderful sacrifice.
oh my
I mean,
God.
that was the most outrageous thing I feel like I've seen in a while.
Like you said, I mean, what if Trump said that? What if Biden said that? I'm sorry. What if Bernie said that?
Yeah. So see, the thing is, if Biden said it, it'd be like, oh, he's just at worst, it's a gaffe, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I know the
But
next. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was going to go to the next one as well. Speaking of things that we should be pressuring him on, uh, you know, this is another promise. Biden vowed to allow more refugees into the United States, and he's actually set to accept fewer than any modern president, including Trump. Another one that again just like doesn't need to happen. There's more refugees than ever, and you're taking fewer than ever. Why are you doing that? And talking about the crisis at the border, as they like to say, the reason why these people are coming is first of all because of Biden's the policies Biden supported over 50 years that destroyed their South American and Central American homelands.
Right.
But secondly, the reason why they're specifically coming to the US border now is because Biden lied that he would treat them better than Trump did. They're coming here because they say, oh, Biden let us in. And so for him to run on being more humane and then turn around and do the opposite is just exceptional cruelty, because Trump always said, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
But Biden's bait and switch literally lured them there, which is just unconscionable. It's just depressing.
I mean, and you can say like maybe like the difference is Trump. You know, Trump always says the quiet part loud or whatever, which is true. But like you said, the numbers already just within these first 100 days, like, I mean, if they continue in this with this trend, I mean, he's going to very much outdo Trump in terms of denying refugees and increasing just deportations in general. I think you brought up the use of the Title 42 deportations. He's already exceeded like 12 months of what Trump did in these first 100 days, I think.
Yeah, both using Trump's own rules and also outside of those rules. Biden's already deported more people than Trump would deport in entire years,
Yeah.
which is just horrifying. He did that whole performative fake moratorium that a judge overruled, but the ruling didn't require the government to keep deporting people. He chose to do so anyway.
Right.
He gave ICE more funding. He gave ICE larger enforcement priorities. And in full disclosure, actually, this is the first mistake I've ever made on this account. Is I accidentally published the budget for last year instead of this year. So it increased last year. It is also increasing this year by a smaller amount, to be fair.
Okay.
But it's funny because all the people who accuse me of lying on this account, no one caught the one mistake I did actually make. I posted the wrong budget. But it's the same thing with the George Floyd Act. It's something like giving ICE another 750 million to police themselves, which is just bullshit, obviously.
You threw them off the trail with your fake Britishness.
Yeah, I mean, they never suspect that.
Where did the British thing come from, anyways? They just don't believe an American would start such an account?
Well, actually, I work with a lot of British people in my day job.
Okay.
I think that someone along the way misinterpreted my job as meaning that I'm British because I work with British people at my job.
You know, I'm gonna cop to something right now. I did momentarily think you were British as well, because I like very quickly glanced at your profile and just saw UK, and in my mind went, "Oh, okay, British." And then
I think really just a couple people made that misinterpretation, and then a bunch of other people just ran with it.
Okay.
But again, I mean, yeah,
As if it
I'm
matters at all, though, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, your guys deporting asylum seekers, your guys deporting people who needed to be witnesses in mass shooting trials. I mean, he deported Black people during Black History Month, sent a lot of people back to Africa and Haiti. Of course, Haiti's having a lot of problems right now because of their right-wing government that the U.S. has backed. It's egregious.
And when people seeking refugee status from Haiti get sent back, my understanding is oftentimes that's a death sentence.
Oh, it is for a lot of these people, yeah.
Because obviously it's seen as like a betrayal to this, far right fascistic government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just I can't. I mean, the fucking official tweet of Biden's face saying "Don't come here."
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, it was like through the Haitian embassy or something. I forget exactly what.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of those things again. I thought was a joke or a meme or something when I first saw it, and it's like, no, that's very real.
But it's like, what's the difference between that and Trump calling it a shithole country?
Very little.
There's no real difference.
And also, even just the phrasing of it, it's not even like a polite, like, here are the reasons you might not want to come to the U.S. right now. It's just like, don't come here. You're not wanted.
Yeah. Well, and, like I said, I was watching the news more than usual recently, and they have these Republicans on who say, oh, Trump isn't doing, I'm sorry, they have these Republicans on who say Biden's not doing enough at the crisis at the border, Biden's letting too many people in, Biden's not deporting enough people. And it's like, why is this atrocity being framed from people who want the atrocity to be worse, saying the atrocity is not bad enough? Like, when do they have someone on the news who says, you shouldn't be deporting all these people, you shouldn't be caging all these people, we should be doing something better instead? Right. It's always framed as we have to be bad to appease the Republicans. It's never, it's just such a negative framing.
Which is just such an insane thing coming from the political side of the aisle where, okay, I mean, like, to maybe divorce it from the actual politicians, but then just look at the demographics that support them. But like your average sort of like really gung-ho Democratic voter, in their minds, we just stopped the Third Reich. Mm-hmm. But now we have to, appease the remnants of that Third Reich? Like, there's a huge disconnect there. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
It's
and they'll frame it as like pragmatism, like Obama did. Like, oh, that worked out great, didn't it? Just like appeasing Republicans at every turn. Yeah, I mean, it's just
like I said, you'll win over conservative voters by helping them out with their kitchen table issues, even if they won't admit to supporting that. Right? You're not going to win them over by trying to out-racist them or trying to out-pro-cop them. It's not. There's a famous quote from Truman, I think, that I always come back to, where he says, in a race between a fake Republican and a real Republican, the real Republican wins every time. And, that's why Hillary lost. You can't abandon the left. You can't abandon the independents by trying to pander to the right. That will never like you anyway.
Right. And the other thing is like, if you really were concerned with like winning over this certain segment of the population, like that that are like almost willing to sacrifice their lives for a figure like Trump, like they're obviously not going to go for any of these, like, I don't know, just in terms of like attitude and surface level stuff. Like the whole appeal of Trump, right, was like no bullshit, even though he was full of shit and he doesn't really care about those people, but like he still did a good enough job of acting as if he did, and acting as if he was anti-establishment or whatever. Now imagine if you had like that coupled with like sincere, real, genuine good policies. Well, I mean, I guess that's what Bernie Sanders was, I guess in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, this last election was a weird anomaly because of the pandemic, because of the anti-police movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, all these different things. But ultimately, I mean, you don't beat populism by shunning populism, right? If, I always like to compare this to what happened in World War II. In World War II, you had the Great Depression, you had all this economic strife. You had right-wing fascists like Hitler and Mussolini who came up and they mobilized the populist movement for evil. And you had FDR who came up and largely mobilized it for good. And you compare that to 2016, you had Trump fulfilling the Hitler Mussolini role and Bernie fulfilling the FDR role. The reason why Hillary lost was because she came up the middle and says, no, actually, everyone's wrong. Instead of taking the wheel, instead of mobilizing that populist movement for good, she basically said, I actually am the status quo, because when there's all that dissatisfaction with the status quo, people will there'll be a paradigm shift either to the right or to the left. And the only way to beat that shift to the right is to do it to the left better. And she refused to do that. She says, no, things are fine now. America's already great. Now they put America's already great on hats. And of course she lost, you know. So Biden was smart enough to say, oh, I am going to do some change. And he was unfortunately the only option for that groundswell of change to push forward. But I mean,
it's amazing to me that that's who. I mean, I guess it's not amazing now, but when he rallied after, like, I mean, because he started out so, like, I didn't think he had any chance of winning the primaries when it started out. And then the rally, the South Carolina thing where they had everyone drop out of the race. It was disgusting.
I mean, that Biden supporters, they like to mock us, people who predicted that Biden would lose, but I still stand by it. If there hadn't been all of these ground shifting changes, he would have lost.
And it's not like he won by like a large percentage. Like, it was actually a lot closer than I felt like it should have been for at least 4 years of Trump, who wasn't great and was not super popular. It was really close and down to the wire in a way that, like, yeah, I think if we were not in a pandemic, that Trump probably would have won against Biden. Because
and Biden and Pelosi, they hurt down ballot races a lot. I mean, people like to blame left wingers for hurting down ballot races, but not a single person who supported Medicare for all lost. And, you know, again, I was in the South during this. I saw the attack ads and they all said so-and-so's like Pelosi, so-and-so's like Pelosi. It was never like so-and-so's this crazy socialist who likes Bernie, you know.
Yeah.
It just, it is very frustrating. We can get off topic and get angry about this again for a whole other 2 hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, I feel like this entire year for me has been getting off topic and getting angry about this very thing.
Well, there's new things to be angry at now. Like,
we're still only at 19.
I want to kind of continue a little bit with the just overall immigration issues under Biden. I guess particularly at the border. It's funny that I just have to say the border and everyone knows what I mean, but yeah.
Well, 19 in the thread talks about, you know, these kids that are in cages. They're not able to shower. They can't contact their parents. They're being separated from their families still. And a lot of these kids that are in cages, they've got family in the U.S. they can be released to, but they're not getting released to those family members.
And I think that's never brought up.
It really isn't.
Because that's the one thing people are clinging to try to separate Biden from Trump on this issue is they say, I mean, even AOC, and we're not, I promise not to go off on an AOC tangent, but like even she was saying, the difference is they're not ripping babies from the arms of mothers. They're like, no, they're still doing that. They're still separating families.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little nuance with, you know, yes, he got rid of certain policies. Yes, he's instated other policies that have still had a knock-on effect that still results in family separation in the end. I mean, yeah, you can go on and on and on about this. But the kids that are in cages, he doesn't even let them call their parents, right? So it's like, it's not like he's leading with some unique kindness, right? Or some unique efficiency. Again, the person who ran as the only one who was able on day one to fix things was not prepared for any of this. And, you know, he hired the same person who defended family separation under Obama, because, you know, family separation was something that happened a lot under Obama as well. And these are the same cages that were built under Obama, the ones that are overcrowded. You know, they're breaking the Flores agreement. They're not getting toothpaste. They're not getting soap. they're contaminated. They're run by the military. They're for profit. They're next to airstrips that are louder than the legal limit. They're being held longer than they should be held. You know, one of the things that I found really amazing. This is one thing that I came up with on my own. Everything else, like I said, all of these things are just I'm getting them from reputable sources. The picture of them with the plastic curtains. This is something that I noticed. I don't know if anyone else is really talking about, but he replaced the chain link fences with these plastic curtains.
Yeah.
They look nicer, I guess. But to me, and again, I could be wrong on this, and no one's called me out on it if I am, but I'm open to being wrong about this if I am. But to me, I'm thinking this decreases ventilation during COVID, right? Because obviously chain link fences are bad, but at least air can circulate through them.
Right.
Yeah.
Now we've got them in these plastic cages now, where it's like if someone's got COVID in there,
I mean,
they're all breathing that same air all day, right? And so it just seems like another perfect distillation of the optics being much more important than the actual
Conditions.
of the situation, which is really frustrating. And you know, people want to give him the benefit of the doubt. People want to say that he's trying. Then why is he denying media requests? Why is he telling ICE to deny media requests? Why is he halting the journalists from writing along with ICE, like even Trump allowed them to do? You know, because that to me, the gag order seems like a bit of a cover up. It's like if things are getting better, why does he want to hide that from us? You know, and this isn't about conspiracy theories. This isn't about anything like that. It's just like, why is he, you know, why is he doing it? Again, I'm open to a better explanation.
why is like the only footage I've seen from inside one of these places, and I'm loath to call them just detention centers. I mean, I'm just gonna say concentration camp. Why is the only footage I've seen from Ted fucking Cruz on his cell phone being like this? I don't know if you guys saw the footage, but like you can get a good look at what's going on in this cage, and it's just like a pile of people like sleeping basically on top of each other. And there's some PR woman or whatever like trying to like block the view of the camera.
Yeah.
And she keeps saying, give these people dignity, stop filming, give them their dignity. And it's like you see that they're in a cage that you put them in behind you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like blocking all the media. It's just, and I didn't really go look back, but you said like even Trump didn't go quite as far in terms of blocking the media from these places.
Yeah. And again, you know, we talk about who's inheriting what. You know, Obama and Biden, they were sued by the ACLU for detaining asylum seekers as an intimidation tactic. Obama and Biden deported way more people per year than Trump did. I think it's 3,600% that they increased the deportation machine in terms of funding and resources. I mean, you can just go on and on. Like I said, Biden voted several times to increase indefinite detentions. He voted to build walls on the border before Trump. He supported sending the military to the border before Trump. I mean, this is just who he is.
I'm gonna PolitiFact check you on that. He proposed building a fence on the border back in 2008.
I love the whole fence versus wall thing.
Yeah. Even that there's you've probably seen that footage of him, right? He's like he's doing some stump speech or something from, I don't know. He looks like he's at like a, I don't know, like in a restaurant or something. But anyway, just all these old people, and he's just scaring them with like, oh, these drug cartels are trying to break into the country. I'm saying put up a fence along the whole border, and it's like, why did that video get no play during the primaries? Or like, it's so insane.
Well, we can talk more about this when we get to the drug tweet. But I actually did a whole thread on the war on drugs and Biden's involvement in it on 420. And one of the things that no one talks about is how he was upset that George Bush wasn't right wing enough and wasn't sending the military to invade Mexico, Central America, South America to fight the drug cartels. He actually wanted to do a ground war against, which is I think something Buttigieg proposed as well. I think could be wrong.
Is it?
Maybe it was Beto. It was one of those. But yeah, Biden, that was an idea that Biden had first, and he was outflanking the Republicans on that. But you get to the wall. This is another thing that people have debated. The new budget proposal that he put out removes funding for the wall. However, he said not another foot would be constructed, and he says that he would withdraw the lawsuits. And of course, the wall is still being constructed, and they're still seizing people's land for it. And
Yeah.
he doesn't need to do. He doesn't have to do. He could stop them from being done. And it's just the mental gymnastics people have to defend this, like, oh, well, the contract was already done and they already paid for it. I'm like, even if they did already pay for it, you can still say, don't build it, just take the money. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
you
like,
can. I mean,
Yeah,
well,
I
and that's
mean-
well. The thing is that's literally what he's done. Like, so the headline the other day was like, the headline, of course, was misleading and said Biden stops border wall. He stops constructing a border wall, period. And then you look at, you read it, and it's like, okay, he's taking the specific funds that were reappropriated from the military and giving them back to the military. That says nothing about stopping construction. It says nothing about stopping to seize people's land where they need it, quote unquote. So yeah, like all people need is a headline. So it's going to be the same thing with this, like,
I mean,
dropping the patents on the vaccine. Like, didn't you see the headline? He's dropping the patents now. It's like, you got to look into it a little bit more. Like,
And
read the
with-
article at the very least.
continuing the construction of the wall, the people who are defending was like, well, the contracts and the work's already being done. We've already paid for it. That's just like classic sunk cost fallacy. Like, oh,
Yeah.
just went ahead and spent the money. I mean, we can't just stop now. But you
It's-
can. You literally can.
Also, it's not like money's needed anywhere else. How about
The
give me my
fence is built in
$2,000
vain.
check? Anything.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if we want to get into the next one's pretty self-explanatory. Biden says that the quote unquote Muslim ban was a morally wrong thing to do. He says that he was going to cancel that. Of course, he's still not issuing visas to any of the people who were banned from obtaining those visas because of the ban. Another classic example of taking that headline and running without actually doing anything.
Yeah.
So that one is another one that, the quote unquote Muslim ban was just such a huge fire point. And I mean, rightfully so. Obviously, it was wrong, and it remains wrong today. But it's just mind blowing how short people's attention spans are. Where
I do think there's just a lot to, like, the fact that if there's enough media coverage and like news reporting saying, like, oh, they're against this, even if they don't do anything, if they get the reporting saying that they're going to do something, that's enough to, like, make people happy about it. A lot of people are just like, well, okay, he's doing the right thing. The news said so.
yeah,
If it's not reported on again, then it's okay. Not okay that it keeps happening. It just, like, it's give people an excuse to look away from it, I think.
back to brunch. And then if you want to get into the war on drugs one, obviously there's huge support for legalizing cannabis, expunging the convictions, letting people out of jail. He's refusing to do it. Fired his own staff after his administration tricked them into divulging previous legal use.
The firing of the staff was insane to me.
With a notable exception.
Well,
So
yeah,
many-
of course you didn't fire Kamala. That'd be crazy.
How great would it have been, though? if you did?
But this is another great example of, like, why not be the hero? Why not take that boost to your ego that everyone loves you because you did the right thing? I understand why politicians opposed it previously, because they were getting more money from prisons than they were from a commercialized, big pharma exploited weed industry. Now there's so much money in pot. Surely you could get enough of a payday from supporting it. The fact that he's not, what does it come down to? Cruelty, habit? I mean, it's just,
Cruelty.
what's
His
the
legacy is tied up in the war on drugs to some degree.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
like,
mean, his most successful thing outside of falling ass backwards into the presidency was passing the '94 crime bill, probably. I mean, I guess he was VP, but, like, what did he do? I mean, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, he was really proud of that crime bill. Like, he loved bragging about how that was all his idea.
it's absolutely nuts that anyone's ever been in prison for marijuana. It kind of like of all things.
No,
Um,
it's a human rights abuse for sure.
Well, and this is why, again, this is another issue that we could really go on about forever. If anyone listening is interested in this topic, I did do a whole very long thread on Biden and Kamala's involvement in architecting and perpetuating the war on drugs. Um, I mean, there's just so much that you could say about that.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
drop a link to that in the description.
Yeah, but the next one that is there is at least one more drug related tweet in this thread, number 27, talks about how in the 80s Biden worked with leading segregationist and fellow South Carolinian Strom Thurmond to establish those racist mandatory minimum drug sentences. Of course, it doesn't mention this in this particular tweet, but he also helped do the whole crack cocaine disparity where it was like 100 to 1, something
yeah,
like that.
I believe it was 500 to 1 at some point. I could be wrong about that, but I remember it being
That's great.
something really huge. In any case, I mean, both are insane, but
Right. And I mean, he ran again during this huge civil rights movement of 2020. He ran on and won votes for promising to eliminate those mandatory minimums that he established. And of course, now that he's elected, he's actually looking to extend Trump's souped up version of those mandatory minimums that we currently have. So again, he has an opportunity to repair some of the damage he's done, and he runs screaming in the opposite direction to further cement his legacy.
is it a vendetta for him? Is he just like real mad that Hunter got caught up with all this stuff, so he wants to punish everyone else?
well,
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So now his son, again, it's good that his son got the treatment that he needed. But we just talk about this, very Trumpian level of hypocritical nepotism. He shielded his own children from facing any criminal consequences for their own drug abuse, and now
yeah,
his
not
son is
just
going
Hunter, I think too, but
yeah, his daughter too, and
yeah.
now Hunter's
Yeah.
going to profit off of writing a book chronicling his addiction that he's using the White House platform to get press for. So again, he Biden ruined all these people's lives, and now his son got preferential treatment and is going to make bank off of it, which is just again disgusting. I mean, there's just no other word
Yeah,
for it.
it's horrible.
I think out of all the issues, I think for the most part, I think Biden is sort of the typical empty suit politician where he'll kind of go where the winds blow. But I kind of have this feeling that one of his only true convictions is he is very anti-drug, like in reality. Like he really does believe that the war on drugs is a good thing. I
Well,
could be wrong about that, but like,
I do think that he does hold a little bit of conviction in the sense that, oddly, both Biden and Trump don't drink. So I mean, I do think they have some sort of personal held belief there. But you talk about how Biden goes with whatever's expedient. I think that's true. However, the times he does stick his neck out is to be uniquely awful. I mean, you look at
yeah.
his opposition to desegregating schools, his crusade against busing. I mean, that was so unpopular at the time that even Harry Byrd, KKK people, right wing Republicans in the Senate, even they were like, dude, you're taking this too far. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like he, like I said, he thought George Bush wasn't being aggressive enough on the war on drugs. He positioned himself to the right of Reagan a few times. So he goes wherever the wind blows. The only time he ever has any passion is when it's
The
destructive.
worst things. Yeah. He yeah, I mean, the Strom Thurmond thing, I mean, I don't know how anyone lets that slide, really. Like, I mean, he gave like the eulogy at his funeral and shit. It's just
And again, I'm from South Carolina. I know Strom Thurmond. I mean, there's no
you can't spin that guy in a positive light as far as I know.
You
Um,
absolutely don't got to hand it to him.
yeah.
So if we go to 29, back to the taxes that we touched on a little bit, he promised on day one to eliminate Trump's tax breaks. Trump took it down from 35 to 21. Biden wants to raise it to 28. So again, he's largely preserving Trump's tax breaks. He is abandoning his promise to raise the estate tax, and the top marginal tax rate that he's proposing is lower than it's been for the majority of American history. So again, very conservative on taxes, and it will be spun as better than Trump, which again is not the argument that these people seem to think it is.
Right.
This
It's
is
like,
more of the shortening goalpost stuff, right? Like, well, they got it down to 21. There's no way you can get it back up to 35, but maybe we can get it to like something reasonable, like 28.
well, I just
And,
realized
and
it's right in the middle between the two numbers.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
um,
Some
yeah, I think
advisor check for that.
I think I want to say Mitt Romney's proposed top marginal income tax was higher than that in the 2012 race, but I didn't look it up. So
I wouldn't be surprised. But I
yeah.
mean, this is the thing. I mean, Biden and all other boomers, they profited off of living in that golden generation that was born out of a very high top marginal tax rate in a very large welfare state, relatively speaking. And of course, they've very quickly pulled the ladder up behind them, and it's very disappointing to look at in context. Well, just to go through the other ones, then, I mean, Biden ran on saying Trump doesn't believe in science, and I do. Again, what's worse, saying you don't believe in science or saying you believe in it and then ignoring it anyway? Pick your poison. But whether it's oil pipelines, whether it's oil drilling, whether it's fracking, whether it's increasing the military, which is the world's largest polluter, Biden's just not good on climate. And then, you can pat yourself on the back for the Paris Accord all you want. It's not going to move the needle on the climate apocalypse more than probably a year. What I mean? Like, whatever.
It doesn't really do much of anything. I have my understanding is it's almost more symbolic at this point than anything else.
And I don't think we ever really, like, we were always in it. I don't think we ever actually met the guidelines anyway.
Probably.
I don't think so.
But yeah, if you've already talked about the military budget, we can kind of skip over how he's increased it 21 billion and hired a military industrial complex executive to run it. Illegally bombed Syria without congressional approval, which is something that he said was an impeachable offense if someone did that. Promised to rejoin the nuclear deal. Of course, is not doing that because instead he's bombing Iranian forces in Syria. The kicker, though, is that he did this the same day, at least within 24 hours, that he pretended he couldn't pass $15 minimum wage because of the rules.
Yep.
The Constitution didn't stop him from doing this. Promised we'd leave Afghanistan in 2014. Now says he's going to do it at 9/11. Missed the deadline that was a couple days ago that initially had been set. He's trying to stay in Iraq forever. Even when he leaves Afghanistan, it's going to be private. Contractors are still fighting there. He says he reserves the right to still do airstrikes anyway. I mean, just as, again, like you said, the headline: "We're leaving. We're not leaving."
Yeah, same with Biden ends the war in Yemen. Like that was like those were the headlines, and that one specifically remember because like right before that was announced, I was like, arguing with someone on Twitter about it, and they were like rubbing it in my face, like, "Oh, look at this, Bernie, bro. He's ended the war." And I'm like, read not even the fine print, read the article. Like, the words are chosen very carefully. It says like no defensive forces. I forget exactly how it was phrased, but it all amounts to like the war is not ending. Like support for Saudi Arabia is going to persist, of course. And even like American troops are going to still be there, but only or rather, I said it the opposite way, only in a defensive capacity.
Yeah.
Which basically means killing people when it's deemed defensive,
Well, it's just like in SpongeBob. It's like one day later. He says, "I'm going to stop supporting it in Yemen." A couple weeks later, $23 billion arms deal.
Right.
He says one thing, gets the headlines, does the opposite. Same thing with Israel. I mean, he's no different from Trump with Israel. He didn't move the embassy, but he's not going to move it back. He's still going to try to stop the ICC from prosecuting the war crimes. He's still going to send billions of dollars in unconditional military support. He's still going to let the crown prince who killed Jamal Khashoggi come to the country when he wants to, even though he promised he was going to block that. And that's actually illegal to allow someone who did an extrajudicial killing come to the country. Same thing in South America. Trump backed these far right fascist coups in Venezuela and Bolivia. Biden is no different from him on that position.
Foreign and this policy is all, again, like, as much as a lot of this is a continuation of Trump, it's again a continuation of Obama, Biden.
Yep. I mean, a lot Obama and Biden droned more than any president.
I did.
I think Trump droned more per year. Obviously not total because it was 4 years. I think Trump continued that upward swing. And again, who built that program?
I expect the swing will always be upward from this point on, as long as we continue to elect, basically neoliberal politicians who believe in trying to get the whole world to sign on to the US's version of capitalism.
And to come back home, tweet number 37, you look at the post office. Again, this is a great example of Trump doing whatever he wants and Biden pretending his hands are tied. Biden's getting called on to fire Louis DeJoy. I don't know. Louis DeJoy.
The Postmaster General.
This is a great example of a public service being underfunded to the point where it sucks so that people will support privatizing it. I'm a big, I have had miserable experiences with the post offices. They've lost a bunch of my mail. I've been threatened by a postal worker. I mean, I've had terrible experiences with the post office, and I am a big supporter of the post office. And people will tell me like, oh, well, if you don't like the post office, then you won't like universal health care. Like, ha, ha, ha. And it's like, no, I want the post office to be better. I'm upset that it's bad. And that's why we need to give it more funding, right? That's why we need better, stronger public programs. We need to have public banking at the post office. We need to do all these things. So I think it's a very common misconception, and this is a great example of it. People think criticizing something means you want to get rid of it. It means you want to make it better,
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you can look at history and recent history and like, at the very least, Republicans have been trying to just eliminate the post office and completely privatize it, for a while now. And so they slowly chip away at it, there's less funding, all of that kind of stuff. And that's going to have, negative impact, on how well it operates. Obviously, it's that same kind of thing of I don't know why this is the first example that comes to mind, but the U.S. intentionally hobbling Cuba at every step of the way to be socialism. You like socialism? Look at this. Yep. Over here. It's why is it fucked up in this particular way? Oh, we did that.
But besides appointing a board that can fire the Postmaster General, you think about the funding. Half of Biden's discretionary spending is military spending. The increase in military spending, the amount that he's adding to the military as opposed to Trump, is several $billion greater than his entire CDC budget during a pandemic. All of the money that Biden's putting towards the CDC could fit inside just the additional military spending. So it's you're going to tell me we can't give money to the post office?
And then you have to take a look across over to the right, and they're saying that Biden's increased funds aren't enough because they barely cover inflation, which I don't even know if that's true. But yeah.
So if we're just going to try to finish these last few real quick, there's only a couple more. Biden would brag about how he voted 50 plus times in the 90s, so it's much higher now.
Oh, that was just in the 90s. Okay.
In the 90s, he was bragging about how he voted against public funding for abortion 50 plus times. He ran on supporting a repeal of the Hyde Amendment, which blocks federal funding for abortions, which of course disproportionately hurts minority communities and obviously women. Now that he's in office, he's refused to even say the word abortion, and his press secretary has dodged all questions about it, saying he's a devout Catholic who goes to church. So again, how is that structurally different than a conservative? I would love for someone to tell me. In that same vein, Obviously he's not been held accountable for his multiple sexual assault allegations, which Kamala Harris has said she believes are true. But he's calling on Cuomo to resign for his sexual assault allegations, which again is correct. Cuomo should resign. But it's just very Trump-like, where it's like, Trump had lots of sexual assault allegations, and what did he do? He brought Bill Clinton's accusers to the debate with Hillary. It's like,
right.
Not only are you bad, but you're going to now throw how other people are bad in their face in the same way. Again, I'd love for someone to explain to me how this is any different from Trump. Besides, I'm not seeing it.
I mean,
I think the only. Oh, go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
I was just going to say they're basically the different sides of the same coin. But Biden's part of the establishment and fits the image that they want, even if he is in support of basically the same stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because the rallying cry was how Trump said grab her by the pussy, which again is bad, is wrong. Biden is credibly accused of actually having done that.
Right.
No one does. Right. And it's just, you think of how easy it is to not cede moral high ground to Republicans, how low the bar is to not run someone who has the same problems as the Republican candidate does. And we weren't even able to do that. Democrats were lucky that they got away with it this time. But ultimately, what are we getting out of it?
Yeah.
So
they didn't want to face reality. They didn't want to entertain the idea that perhaps Tara Reid was not a Russian agent or whatever, and use exactly the same tactics as Trump supporters did when Brett Kavanaugh was being accused. This woman's a liar, she's an opportunist, blah 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 blah. It's just like you're saying, yes, please show me the difference. I don't see it at all. Well, I mean, the only difference is that actually Tara Reid's claims have more validity. In any case, like we've been saying, that could be an entire episode.
But I mean, even if you didn't believe them, I mean, he's on video groping children.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, kissing women, coming up behind them, smelling them, grabbing them. I mean, it's well documented that he swam in the nude to make his female Secret Service agents uncomfortable. I mean, it's not like this came out of nowhere. I mean, the Daily Show was running segments on how he was creepy towards women in 2008 or whenever it was.
Right.
And I think it's really sad how much it's damaged the Me Too movement, because people like Alyssa Milano and employees at Biden deleted all their Me Too tweets. It really made a genuine movement against predatory men look like a cynical, partisan, hypocritical nonsense.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's what it turned out to be. And it didn't have to be that way, right? It didn't need to be that. It shouldn't have been that. And I just think it's really unfortunate how far that set back the movement towards accountability for powerful men. So another very depressing point.
Yes. I guess maybe just to close it out then. So we've made it pretty clear what we think about Joseph Robinette Biden. But it appears to me through, I don't know, at least mainstream media sources that, I mean, of course, like as you would expect, I guess, like your corporate Democrats, your sort of mainstream Democrats are all, applauding him literally and figuratively. And, but I found it especially dispiriting to see, like, I believe all of what you would call the squad giving him high ratings and saying surpassing expectations, and not in a snarky way of like, my expectations were so low, look, he surpassed them. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like this is this only perpetuates the problem if we can't even have like our progressive elected officials like who all said they wanted to push him hard to the left and so on. Like, I don't know. I just find it dispiriting, I guess.
I mean, I never thought we'd be able to push Biden to the left, because if the Black Lives Matter movement couldn't do it and the pandemic couldn't do it, then nothing can do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we shouldn't still try. And I also think that criticizing people from the left, if anything, if you do it in the correct way, should actually make their job easier, right? Because a lot of times politicians feel pressure from the right and they feel obligated to move to the right. By us pulling them left and pressuring them from the left, that should actually give them a little bit more wiggle room where it's like, oh, well, I have that mandate. I have that platform of people saying these things. So I am now justified and validated by pushing for those things. And so, you know, I don't want to get into all the criticism or defense of AOC either way, but just like AOC should be pushing Biden left and criticizing him from the left, we should be pushing all politicians and criticizing them from the left, because either it moves them or it doesn't. But we need that record to show that there are people who believe those things and want those things, right? Because too often the discussion is, are they electable? Will people vote for them? We are people who vote.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to worry about this mythical other person. What will we do? What do we want? What do we think? And we should talk about that. And ultimately, whether that gets anything done or not is a different question, but it's the least we can do. And it's, you know, it's one step in the right direction. So at least we got to keep doing it.
Right.
100% agree.
I agree. Maybe that's a good place to wrap up, guys.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sorry to have to, it feels like I'm cutting it a little early somehow, but I do have to really get going. But
Weston, it was great to have you on. Yeah, and thanks for coming on. It was great to have you.
Yeah,
Sure.
man, really good.
Yeah.
We should try it again soon.
Cool. Well, thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
Yeah.
Take care.
goodbye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. Thanks.
100 days, 100 nights to know a man's heart. 100 days, 100 nights to know a man's heart. And a little more before he knows it's all. You know a man can play the part of a saint just so
The first voice recording was made in 1860. It was a 10-second fragment of the French folk song Au clair de la lune recorded by inventor Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. But who will make the final voice recording and when? What will it be? Who will hear it?